Hey, this is Jim McDonald. Welcome to episode 229 of the PowerCast. This episode is part one of our conversation with Dr. Andy Galpin. Andy Galpin has a PhD in human bioenergetics and is a professor at the Center for Sports Performance at California State University, Fullerton in Southern California. He's also a member of the Barbell Shrugged crew and has his own side podcast called Body of Knowledge. This was a very enjoyable session. We talked to Andy for over 3 hours, which is why it's 2 episodes. Great guy, a lot of information, able to break it down where anyone can understand it. Doesn't take himself overly seriously, and yet is highly, highly intelligent and interesting to talk to. So we had a great time talking to Andy out in the new Super Training Gym. Things are not entirely set up, and from a podcast standpoint, we're still figuring out exactly where that's going to live in the building. So we're obviously not set up there. Things are shot a little bit differently than normal. Anyway, like and share this episode. We'll be back on Friday with part 2.
Support for this episode of the PowerCast comes from Precision Nutrition, home of the world's top nutrition coaches. Head over to get.pn/PowerCast for a free nutrition course, especially for PowerCast listeners, focusing on the role of carbs. That's get.pn/PowerCast. Reebok.com, home of the Legacy Lifting Shoe, the official shoe of the PowerCast. 8-Man Apparel at 8manstrong.com. Compex Muscle Stim products at CompexUSA.com. Use the code PowerCast for an additional 28% off all but the lowest price model. HowMuchYouBench.net. Use the code PowerCast for 15% off slingshots and free shipping on orders over $100. And bodybuilding.com, the world's largest fitness website and supplement store. Bodybuilding.com has free plans for every level. Visit bodybuilding.com today to become your best self.
Recorded live in West Sacramento, California, this is Mark Bell's PowerCast. Standing just to the left of Jim McDonald, here's your host, Mark Bell.
Technically, I'm on both sides of that equation.
You get to call yourself the talent?
I get to call myself the talent.
Nice.
Yeah, I bitch about myself when I'm talent, and then I bitch about my.
Why are you late?
And then when I'm
yourself.
when I'm talent.
I'm talent.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. You got it, 100%. I think I'm going to see if I can spill the coffee on myself one more time.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I was walking with my wife the other day, and I spent all this time on making like a bulletproof coffee. And I blended MCT oil in it and butter, and I just nailed it just right. And I threw a little bit of my own product in there. Had the flavor just perfect.
When you say your own product, you're talking about the Keto Pro protein, not your own not like
not my own stuff.
Okay,
yeah. I didn't dip my junk in there.
Just checking.
But I got it all blended up just perfect, and we go on a walk, and we're walking, and for some stupid reason, I don't know why, the top just explodes off of it. And it landed in such a way that every single drop of the coffee was 100% out of the thing. And I was like, motherfucker.
Did you start licking the ground?
Yeah. You're like, that's
there.
just, and
too good.
And you don't think to yourself that you could just start over,
All right.
That's too easy. You got to piss and moan about it for a while, right? And
God forbid you lost $1 of coffee.
Were you
right.
Were you outside?
Yeah, it was just,
okay. So like animals came up and like they started drinking the coffee, and they got jacked.
Super
and
keto.
They just fucking burst into ketosis.
They lost all their fat, and now they're super lean, crazy squirrels running around Davis.
Exactly. We're here today with Andrew Galpin, and he's going to explain what he does, because I don't really know, because it's all sciencey and stuff, and I don't want to be inaccurate with it. So tell us what's up. Tell us what you do.
So I have a PhD in human bioenergetics. Repeat that.
You have a PhD in human bioenergetics.
See, I'm a teacher, so sometimes I make sure you're listening and paying attention.
I got a story for you.
Page 43, kids.
Before you go on, a couple weeks ago, we were at the Olympia, and I was sitting next to Ed Cohn.
Yeah.
And people
Name
said,
dropper.
so who's going to be on the show coming up? And I said, oh, we got Andy Galpin in a couple of weeks. And somebody said, oh, what does he do? And he's like, he's like an exercise, something. And Ed just reeled off your title.
Shut up.
No, I'm not kidding.
You're so lying right now.
No, I'm totally not lying.
No way.
Yeah, he totally knows who you
The
are.
GOAT.
I don't know. My heart just went.
I knew that was going to happen. I've been
That's
saving that.
incredible.
That was one of the two things I was saving for this episode.
Man, I just started sweating. He's like, as a smaller person myself, like, jeez.
Yeah.
Like, what a. Anyways, I don't even know how to follow that.
Absolute beast.
You're going to be disappointed now. But I'm a scientist. So I'm the director for what's called the Center for Sport Performance at Cal State Fullerton.
Mm-hmm.
So I do research on muscle, acute responses, chronic adaptations. Basically, I try to do science on why training happens, how adaptations occur, how you get bigger, faster, stronger, but to do that from a training perspective.
Right.
So we use athletes, we use training protocols. I'm not using exercise to try to learn more about muscle. I'm using muscle to try to figure out why is it this training program is more effective than that program, or is it, and is there a metabolic or muscular explanation for all
There's
that?
so much wrapped into all that because it's obviously there has to be some sort of training stimulus. But then there's sleep, there's hydration, there's your nutrition. If we were just to study 3 sets of 10 of curls with 100 different people and they all use 200 pounds, we'd have 100 different results if all the other variables weren't controlled. And then on top of that, we'd have 100 different results anyway because they would all have different genetics.
Yeah, we just did actually. So maybe I'll back up. Like the reason I got into this field is because I remember training. I started lifting when I was probably 13 or 14, and I played all sports in high school. Played college football.
When do the anabolic steroids start?
Yeah,
14,
exactly.
15? Just like a year or two later?
Yeah, something like that. I started doing Olympic weightlifting, competing and stuff in that. And I remember probably being 17, 18 years old and looking at some of the training protocols and being like, okay, I can't find any research on this. And then as I started to get my graduate work and actually becoming a scientist, I remember looking and saying like, literally no one's ever studied 15 sets of 3 versus 3 sets of 15. Like no one's ever studied 8x3 versus 3 by, like, where's all this research? Like, where is, and then you're going to get all these people telling me like, oh, this is a better training protocol. This is optimal. I'm like, this shit doesn't exist. Like, it's not out there at all. And we certainly have no mechanisms behind what's going on. And so I was like,
Most
man.
of the evidence is empirical, right? People just going by experience,
anecdotal.
by what they've done, right?
Yeah, exactly, which is good. That is an excellent form of research. And that is important. If you look at like training research, we don't have anything better than the decades of the Russians put out there. Like, that's
Right.
still the best shit we have.
Yeah, because they'd kill you if you didn't get results.
Yeah. And they logged everything. They put it all
Yeah.
together. And so I was originally like, well, like someone has to do this research.
Yeah.
Like, someone has to actually start doing these things to figure out what's actually going on. So I realized I couldn't believe it, but no one is studying these things.
Who are some of the leading researchers? I'm sure since the time you started, things have changed a little bit. So, you know, who are some people that people should be paying a little bit more attention to?
Well, it's really difficult because people tend to sector themselves out. So if you look at like Brad Schoenfeld, he's done more work in the area of hypertrophy than anything else. Nobody has done more training studies than him. He's done exactly what you mentioned, but he's isolated out. Okay, let's test the hypothesis of rest intervals. You know, if you remember, you're probably taught in school, it's 30 to 90 seconds for rest.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you listen to any practitioner, like some do that, some do totally different. And so he's really teased out, is it that a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes? And his research actually suggests that there's no magic number there.
Oh, wow.
Because, like, for example, if you held a really tight rest interval, say 30 seconds between your set, you're going to get a lot more metabolic stress. Like, it's going to burn more.
Right.
But what's going to happen to your load? It's going to come down. Volume or load's going to have to come down.
We talk about loads a lot on this show. Not necessarily in this fashion, but
No, yeah.
we had that one space load that one time with Lane Norton. Dr.
Lane Norton.
Oh,
Yeah, we
God,
talked
Lane.
about.
So if you do a longer rest interval, you'd be able to keep your volume or intensity higher. So there's pros and cons to all of it is the point. Brad's good. Lane is fantastic. He's not really doing a bunch of original research himself. He's not a scientist, but he puts out a lot of good information. And if you just look around the country, there's not really that many of us that are really doing true sport performance
So,
stuff.
you know, just kind of going back to that rest interval thing. So, for example, just using curls as an example, just the easiest thing for everybody to grab a hold of.
Plus, with those pipes, why would you not?
That's right. That's right. That's all we got to talk about. I'm really just brought you here so I can get bigger arms. That's kind of the whole thing.
Well, if you notice, I'm only about a foot from Jim and about 3 feet from you because those biceps need the extra,
trying to get
extra
that
room there.
perspective, right?
Yeah.
So
it's dark matter.
The
We're over here in the tiny bicep club, so
in this sector over there.
Yeah.
So if you were going on a short rest interval, you'd obviously be using less weight. So you can get a great stimulus from that. You can get through 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 10. You can get finished with X amount of work in X amount of time, and that'll have a great stimulus. Stan Efferding, former pro bodybuilder, he taught us a lot about that, and that's what a lot of bodybuilders use. A lot of bodybuilders will kind of quote unquote chase the pump. They try to get a pump, and then once they have it, they try to keep it.
Yep.
Now, there would be another way of training where if we took 2 or 3 minutes, I would be stronger and be able to lift more weight, and we get a stimulus from that too.
Totally.
So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about doing this, right?
And actually, one of the things that we're trying to do, and Brad was important in this, is trying to figure
Brad
out...
Castleberry, right?
He's trying to figure out, well, what are the actual mechanisms behind growth? In other words, like that's why in our lab we biopsy. So we take muscle samples, we actually analyze it in a bunch of different ways. I'm trying to figure out, well, what are they actually, if we understand the mechanisms behind what causes a cell to grow, then we can start teasing out some of these concepts. And so what it looks like is the pump, the metabolic stress, is potentially one of those mechanisms. Mechanical tension, so simply asking the fiber to produce a lot of force, is another one. And so if we understand that, then we can say, actually, it probably makes sense that both of those training styles could induce hypertrophy.
Right.
But the next step would then eventually be, well, what about combinations of them? How often should I do one versus the other? And we don't have any data on that. And that's one of those ones that I have to defer back to coaches and say, well, I don't know, what's your training programs look like? You've trained 1,000 athletes. What's it look like?
Right.
Because we don't have any science on anything like that.
What do you think of bro science? You hear that kicked around a lot. And
so
bro
I am
science
actually a huge defender of bro science.
Yeah, same here.
Like, it's actually turns out, like, if you look back at the trajectory, the vast majority of bro science turns out to be right.
Yeah, drop sets and shit like that.
Yeah,
and just
it turns out that works pretty good.
And like a burnout set, like before you leave the gym, just to end up with a sick pump before you go out Friday night, so your arms look more jacked.
Yeah, I am definitely a bro science defender for the most part. The only reason I get very irritated with bro science is when they're trying to justify or sell a product behind it.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, shut the hell up. There's no science on that. You're completely off bases there. But if you're just simply saying, hey guys, this is the workout I did and this is the results I got. Here's my nutrition. Here's my supplements. Here's all that stuff. And this is what I got. Well, there's merit there.
Right.
And there's decent, like, do you know how many studies have ever been done on drop sets?
Probably not many.
Probably not many. I don't know either, but I'm guessing the fact that I don't know.
And I would say that someone like Charles Glass, who's put more bodybuilders on stage at the Olympia than any other coach, is going to know something about it, right?
My guess is he knows a little bit.
We had Hanny Rambat on recently. It sounds like a fake name, but it's a real person. He's a bodybuilding coach, and he's works with everybody from Phil Heath, 7-time Mr. Olympia champion, to The Rock. He works with a lot of high-end people. And when the information he was sharing with Jim and I, it sounds like these workouts are pretty damn, grueling.
Yeah.
A lot of times he'll start and finish with the same thing, but it's really a lot of what you're talking about. It's him in the gym. He's not doing muscle biopsies.
Yeah.
But he's testing what works. And he used to have his athletes in between his sets. He used to have them stretch. Then he found that wasn't really the best idea, and it was actually kind of dangerous, and some of the athletes were getting injured. So rather than him being an asshole about it and him saying, this is my method, this is what works, he took a step back and he was like, maybe I'm not right. Like maybe I'm wrong. And maybe I should try something else. And so instead of them stretching in between sets, they might be doing dumbbell bench press, and they might superset that with a push-up. Well, now their quote-unquote minute rest is now devoted to flexing.
Right.
So they're holding a static position. So they don't really get a rest.
Yeah.
And they just kind of annihilate the muscle. They'll bounce around to a few other exercises and then kind of loop back around to that kind of finisher. But that's great that he recognized, like, hey, something's off. Like, this isn't really right.
And that's all science is. Like, it doesn't have to be in a lab to be science. It doesn't have to be peer reviewed.
It's about method. It's not about about anything else. It's it's about how you approach it and how you test it and what your theories are, and being willing to say, oh, that didn't work.
Like if you look at Aristotle's idea of the scientific approach, right? here's what it is. We have a hypothesis, we test results, we do, you all know those steps, right?
Yeah.
Well, it just, none of that has to be in a university setting.
Right.
Like, no, the only problem is when you do it on your own is making sure that your measures are objective and repeatable and reliable and unbiased and things like that. And if those can be done, then you're doing equally scientific stuff that we're doing, at least in some merit. But actually, kind of your comment earlier, one of the tricks I play on my students all the time is I'll pull up bro science YouTube videos, right? And I'll have them, reflect to it or react to it. And I always trick the shit out of them. Because they'll pull something up about somebody like that, and they're going over some crazy drop setting approach or whatever they're doing, and they'll want to just shred the person with their 3 years of academic, undergraduate degree.
That's when you're at your strongest, is when you learned it 15 minutes ago. Right?
Exactly.
They're like baby rattlesnakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I tell them is like, okay, stop. What is that person's goal? Who are they talking to? Well, if you don't understand that, if that wasn't your first question, then you have no idea if that person, like you have no way to judge that person. So, for example, that coach you mentioned, the exact same concepts that he may preach to be gospel true, not true, may be absolutely true in bodybuilding, but maybe not true in powerlifting or weightlifting or training an athlete or training a person for weight loss. And so we have to first look at the lens of which the person's talking about. So when you give a nutrition recommendation, my first step needs to be, actually, Mark's goals are A, B, and C, and D. So he's probably talking about it from the lens of getting A, B, C, and D. He's not talking about it from the lens of X, Y, and Z. So therefore, I'm not going to talk about how wrong he is because a science that showed over here proved him wrong. Because he's not talking about that. Like he's actually preaching a different goal. Right. And that is really important that we always understand that. So if you see somebody on a YouTube video or online or something and you realize this person coaches NFL players, or whatever, you can automatically at least box it in and saying, well, they're talking about this from the perspective of developing an athlete versus developing a bicep versus keeping you from hurting your elbow, returning you to play, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, we can go into any number of topics and go into detail there, but that's the important thing to understand is like, what lens are they looking at this from? Well,
and then, is the person somebody that you would view as a reputable authority? And if so, why? Like what? Again, going back to bodybuilding, Stan Efferding coming through this gym.
Yeah, who's he? What's he ever done?
Yeah, right.
Come on.
Yeah, he's a big pussy. We know that. Yeah. But having somebody like that come through this gym put a lot of things into perspective for me, in a sense that when he powerlifted, he hung around with powerlifters and acted like a powerlifter. Right. Eating more food, taking more rest in between sets, taking giant dumps and clogging up the toilet, and so on, right? And, just like literally his whole day was wrapped around the heavy training that he was going to do. And he knew he just needed more rest for that. Yeah. Whereas with when he was bodybuilding, he wasn't hanging out with us. He was hanging out with bodybuilders, hanging out with Flex Wheeler, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. And a lot of people make the mistake of saying, oh, man, it's crazy how Stan did bodybuilding and powerlifting at the same time. And he was such a master at both because he didn't. Because he would choose one at a time, and he would focus in and hone in at one at a time.
And the thing that we say all the time, too, is that powerlifters who give up on bodybuilding altogether are doing the wrong thing.
A giant mistake.
They're making a huge mistake.
We did this little episode on my little mini podcast where I basically traced...
Little mini podcast.
Well, it's different.
It's really put into perspective how small it actually is.
We only do like 9 episodes a year.
Gotcha.
So it's, that's not like not 2 a week.
Yeah,
guys.
We're cranking them out over here.
God. Where I kind of traced the trajectory of how lifting in America started. So how it started from the 1800s, how it evolved from bodybuilding and why the split between weightlifting and powerlifting happened, why the split between that and bodybuilding. So there's a couple of very specific things that happened. And I'm sure you guys know Joe Weider.
Yeah.
And like these names.
The Weider principles.
Right. Well, there's even guys before him, Bob Hoffman, and they had these fights, and the result shifted the culture in America. To give you a quick version of that story, basically Hoffman was the guy that started York Barbell, right? Weightlifter, powerlifter.
Yeah, and started some of the original magazines and all
Strength
that
and Health and all these things, right?
York Barbell, I think, maybe even, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had a ton. He was the first real supplement guy.
Yeah.
He was the first real magazine guy. He did all these things. Well,
crazy.
He wanted the sport to be about performance. Training was about performance. In other words, like powerlifting, weightlifting.
Not necessarily just about how you look.
Right. Well, Weider was like, for every 10 guys that want to be strong, or for every 10 guys, for every guy that wants to be strong, I'll show you 10 who want to look strong.
Yeah.
Right.
And he wanted it to be more about that. Well, he was a protege of Hoffman's. They got into a fight. Weider won because Weider's primary protege was Arnold.
Right.
So he blew up Arnold. That's why they made the movie.
Right.
Arnold got huge. They took off, and that just killed Hoffman.
Arnold was in a movie.
Yeah. One that, probably shaped all of our
Yeah.
Pumping
training
iron.
careers.
Absolutely. It changed everything forever. Anyway.
That's on my list of, like, if you're in this field and you haven't watched that movie, get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's-
Get out.
yeah.
And what's crazy is
can you
how
not
hard it was for them to get funding to make that movie.
I believe it. I mean, this like field did not exist
No.
prior to that.
No, there was no track record at all about how it would perform.
No, not at all. So what eventually happened was basically that launched it off. So Hoffman lost, and powerlifting and weightlifting basically died until CrossFit.
Right.
I mean, let's be real. Like,
That's true.
they were basically
I
gone.
agree with that statement. Yeah.
So nobody really cared about that.
Thanks, CrossFit.
But the point was, what happened is, if you look at, there's a German philosophy that says basically you have thesis, which is like an idea. Here's my thought. I think this is going on. You have antithesis, which is, no, okay, that's totally wrong. And then somewhere in the middle, you're going to actually land back on a synthesis.
Right.
Right. Well, this is exactly what happened. So all the principles that were about lifting for the first 70 or 80 years were bodybuilding based. That's what they were. And then this split happened, and it was 20 or 30 years that left a space open for CrossFit, where people said, hey, look, if all we do is these bodybuilding things, we're not actually very fit, we're not actually very functional.
Right.
So swing the other direction. But the problem with that was, that doesn't necessarily mean every single principle from bodybuilding is wrong.
Correct.
Right.
That's where people jump too
Because they
far.
worked, right?
Yes, they totally work. Like, if that's the only thing you're doing is 7 different sets of wrist curls all day, and tomorrow is just for your left toe, and the day after that is for your right deltoid, for the average person, you're not going to be super fit.
Right.
But that doesn't mean every principle is gone. So, like, to your comment where I originally got on the story was, if you're a powerlifter and you give up all of your bodybuilding stuff, that's probably going to come at a detriment eventually, because you're going to over-specify into one type of training. And I think now that we can land maybe with that synthesis, which says the same thing about CrossFit. CrossFit has massive limitations to it. So does weightlifting. So does powerlifting. So does everything else.
It can be overdone.
Absolutely. And it can be overspecified. Like, if you look at a CrossFitter, they have lots of holes in their physiology. They have lots of holes in their performance, just like a weightlifter does, or a powerlifter does, or a MoveNap person, or whatever the hell you do. If all you're doing is one type of training, you're probably going to leave yourself in these holes of function. But if your goal is to maximize that, well, then you can get with it for a while.
Right.
For a while, though. Eventually, you're going to have to.
I think a lot of people that do some recreational bodybuilding, where they're not really necessarily going to step on stage, but they do devote some intensity to it, and they are using kind of low rest intervals. I mean, I don't know what the science would show exactly, but in my opinion, a lot of those guys, and there's obviously PEDs and everything else involved. That aside, I think it would make for somebody who is pretty functional and somebody who is pretty healthy, at least just in my own experience and being around some of these guys. Whereas powerlifting, many times gets taken too far. We get too big, we get too fat, we lose flexibility, tying the shoe gets to be hard, which at first isn't a huge problem because you kind of have more tightness and you can be more explosive in a squat. But somewhere along the lines, losing athleticism is going to rear its ugly head. I always preach strength is never a weakness, but on top of that, I would say that, being an athlete is there's never a point where being an athlete is going to hurt you, because it's going to allow you longevity in whatever sport it is that you're doing. Have you seen some of that, and with some of the people that you've been working with and some of the stuff you've been studying?
I don't know. Do you remember Chris Moore?
Yeah, I remember the name. Yeah.
So this is exactly his story. So my longtime friend, he just passed.
Yeah. He was with Barbell Shrugged, and he was a good friend of ours. Yeah.
So he did the same thing. He was up to when I lived with him, he was 370 pounds, and he was flirting.
I don't think I was aware that he got that big.
I did not know that.
I remember him telling me he was up over 3 bills, but I didn't know he was approaching 4.
I think he was probably in the 300 neighborhood when he was up with Louis, and probably has some sessions with you guys. But he got up to 370, dude. So he was competing, getting ready for some powerlifting competition. At the same time, I was getting ready for weightlifting national championships, and I was cutting to 69 kilos, and so that's 150 pounds, we'll just call it. And he was going up to 370. So we were literally.
We used to always talk about dieting down to the super heavyweight class. That's what he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. So it was the funniest shit. Like, we would come home, and it was a constant fight between, like, he would turn the fan on, the overhead fan, and I would, like, wait for him to leave the room. Like, turn that shit off because I'm tired. And he would sit there every night and take a whole chocolate bar, like one of those dark chocolate cooking ones, you know, 1,000 calories in it or whatever, and just dip it into a whole thing of peanut butter and just eat that.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
That sounds delicious.
And the whole night I'm there, like, sipping my creatine tea.
Yeah.
And, like, you know.
So how did you guys meet? I'm curious.
So Doug Larson and I, also Barbell Shrug,
Right.
we actually played football together as undergrads. And then that was in Oregon, small school in Oregon. We went to independently, but at the same time, we went to the University of Memphis to get our master's. And when we moved out there, I was like, dude, we're already great friends. We train together, we live together, we take every class together. If we live together, neither one of us are super extroverted, so we're not going to meet any friends.
Right.
No chicks either.
No, well, that too, right? Because we're going to be drinking protein shakes and lifting all day. Like, not good for meeting girls.
Right.
So we landed there. Basically, I called our landlord. I'm like, do you have any other places with a room? And he's like, yeah, there's another place down the street. So I went, actually, my car, like, I drove from Portland, car full of shit, to Memphis, like, had my stuff there, was in my car, drove down the street, walked into a house. That spot that I moved out of, Mike Bledsoe moved into.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And then that spot I moved into was with my buddy Corey, and then Chris Moore was the other roommate there.
So that's the Barbell Shrug tie.
So that's how the whole Barbell Shrug got started.
Yeah.
I finished up. I went on to get my PhD at in Indiana, and the gym had been started, Faction, the first gym. And then Mike was like, I want to do a podcast, and he sent me like the first 3 audio clips of it.
You're like, what's a podcast?
And I was like, what's a podcast? And second of all, I listened to it, and I'm like, this is the stupidest shit I've ever heard, and under no circumstances should you ever start a podcast.
Yeah, why would anybody want to listen to you ramble on about nothing for 4 hours?
When he wanted to start the first gym, I was like, do not start a CrossFit gym. This is 2007 or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, this is the stupidest thing ever.
So business is your strength.
Yes, very, very. I'm very good at predicting the future. So yeah, that's how.
It's like you got a crystal ball.
Yeah, so I lived with Chris for like a year and a half. We trained together and stuff because he had just graduated from the same program. Dude, so he was in the biochemistry lab working there, and he had graduated, but I'd have to call him about like, hey, where did you put this chemical, or where's this sample, or whatever. But he was a scientist like he was a power lifter. Like, if you look around, power lifters are not the cleanliest motherfuckers you've ever seen.
Yeah, this place brand new. It's a mess.
Yeah. So like, I would go in there and shit would just be like, he'd be sweating into chemicals, like pipetting stuff, and just like garbage is everywhere. Like, you know, protein shakes and just garbage everywhere. I'm like, how the hell did you run a chemistry lab in here? It's just like, he ran it. So, and back then it was still those times where if you're a power lifter or weightlifter, like, you hated each other.
Right.
You didn't get along. So we were constantly calling him the stupid power lifter. Like, how functional is that?
Yeah, why are you
blah,
putting
blah.
weights over your head?
Yeah.
Looks way too hard.
Exactly. I have a great video of him trying to do a power clean, and he's probably 350 at the time.
Jesus.
And he tried to clean, I don't know, like 80 kilos. And he pulls it, and he goes to do his hip extension, and he just flings it like 60 feet in front of him. Bing! Barbell goes flying.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it goes smashing out there. So yeah.
How, like, how does somebody build muscle? Like, if you had kind of, I realize the story is very long, but if you had kind of 5 major points for your average 25 to 30-year-old male that's listening to this show right now, who weighs 185 to 200 pounds, what are some key things that they can focus in on that maybe they're not focusing in on to gain muscle mass?
I would love to answer that question, but you're gonna have to sign up for my newsletter.
There we go.
Just kidding. I don't even have a newsletter. Why would you want tactical take-home stuff, Mark? Like, people don't care about that.
Yeah, I know.
Not interested. So gaining muscle mass, right? A couple of things. The easy ones, easy targets are you simply eating enough? All right, calories wise, and probably the biggest thing that right now people are having a hard time with that I've seen, people get protein.
Right.
That's not a hard one.
We've been taught that for a long time now, and there's different protein shakes and all kinds of stuff, right?
Right. But carbohydrate is the more difficult one.
Right.
It's going to be difficult for you, not impossible, clearly, but it's going to be difficult for a lot of people to gain a lot of muscle mass on a very low carbohydrate diet. And people need to be careful when they listen to that, because I didn't say grain or pasta or bread. Like,
right.
Those
Carbs,
are not
everybody's
carbohydrates.
always thinking junk.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So there are lots of very good quality carbohydrates.
Right. Let's just back up for just a split second and let's talk about why it's so important. Like, I feel it's really important for everybody to work on gaining muscle mass. I know women
Absolutely.
will be like, oh man, I don't want to be, but you know, physiologically there's going to be limitations to their growth anyway. So let's just maybe dive into that a little bit. Like why do we need more muscle mass?
So the couple of things that strike out to people, number one, are muscle is what moves you locomotion-wise. That's what moves you through space. So if you want to be able to move through space, not only squat a bar, that's great, but as you get older, you're not going to go from, if the most you've ever squatted in your life is 200 pounds, you're not going to get to 400 pounds when you're 70.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So
There's no
wherever you
like linear progression there.
Exactly. So the higher you can stack that ceiling, the better. Now, there's diminishing returns at some point, of course. If you squat 600 pounds and you get your squat to 800 pounds, it's probably not going to make much of a difference.
Right.
But if you have insufficient levels or just like moderate, well, you might be fine when you're 20, 30, 40. But when you get to be 50, 60 and you're not squatting, deadlifting anymore, like those numbers are going to plummet to a place where you no longer have the eccentric strength to catch yourself from a fall. That's a problem, right? You land down a couple of stairs, so you fall off of something, and you've got to fall, say, a foot or 2 feet.
Right.
That takes a tremendous amount of eccentric strength.
You can't recover enough to even protect yourself.
Exactly.
You fall
That's a
and you get
problem.
hurt.
And that's why if you look at any of these clinically based research facilities, almost anytime they include metrics of strength into their predictors of mortality, it lights the charts up. Which is a fancy way of saying leg strength in particular, even grip strength has actually now come out, but those are massive, significant predictors of mortality.
Wow.
So you're going to, I mean, this is not correlation, this is correlation, not causation.
What was there specific tests that they did for leg strength, or was it just kind of squats or?
Usually never squats, because you're usually looking at people that are 60,
Okay.
not athletes, things like that.
They test them on a leg extension
Leg
machine or
extension, leg
something?
press. Yeah,
Right,
that's
gotcha.
exactly right. So again, just to be super clear there, if you walked into your training session with your team, there's going to be no correlation at all between who squats the most and who lives the longest.
Right.
That's not even going to happen. But if you walk next door, walked into whatever business is next door,
Understood.
then there's going to be a correlation between
To the generally untrained population.
exactly.
Okay.
So getting to just some rudimentary strength, which is to say, like, you don't have to become an elite powerlifter,
Right.
but you know, if you're 20 and you can't squat double body weight or don't have the strength, all right, maybe you don't have the technique or mobility or something, but if you can't leg press 3 times body weight, like those are not good numbers. Like,
I would think that there was a big metabolic component to that. We're going to take our one and only sponsor break for this episode. On the other side, you will learn what the biggest organ in your body really is. We talk a lot about diet and stuff on the show. Lately, we've been talking a lot about keto. When people ask you about keto, like when you feel comfortable like that you're giving them great information?
Yeah, you know, I feel pretty good about it. You know, I think the main thing with any nutritional advice is for me, I just always try to make sure I'm not stepping out of my boundaries.
Right.
I'm not talking about stuff that I don't know about. And so for me, luckily, I've had a lot of experience with keto and been doing it since high school on and off. So I have enough knowledge that I can refer people to, you know, specific things. But when it comes to exact calories and kind of precision of it, that's where I could use a little help.
Well, today's sponsor, Precision Nutrition, is the industry's most respected gold standard for both nutrition education and nutrition coaching. Consultants to companies like Apple, Equinox, UFC, and Titleist, and athletes like the newest U.S. Open champion, Sloane Stephens. I didn't realize that until I just read it right now. They've created something special and brand new for PowerCast listeners today, all about low-carb and ketogenic diets.
There you go.
When you visit get.pn/PowerCast, you get access to a hot-off-the-press free course exploring the science behind low-carb, ketogenic, and paleo-style diets. So that's actually
I'd like to check that out myself, actually.
yeah, there's some pretty specific differences between those things as well. It even tackles the always politically charged question, what's the best diet for you? And that's something we always sort of
There's a lot of
challenge people to
controversies
find. Yeah.
surrounding all that, right?
This course represents some of PN's best work over the last decade as they've helped nearly 100,000 clients get their own eating on track and nearly 50,000 professionals stay on the cutting edge of the industry. So if you want to understand the science behind the low-carb diet trend and the best way of eating for you or a client, grab the free course at get.pn get.pn/PowerCast. That's get.pn/PowerCast.
Sounds good.
Skeletal muscle is the biggest organ in your body. Like I trick people with this all the time. When we ask what's the biggest organ in your body,
say
people always say
skin,
skin,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Well, it's horseshit. It's muscle. It's not even close. And what that means is to be an endocrine organ, you have to secrete hormones, basically. And so we always thought that muscle was stupid. We give all this credit to the central nervous system, right? Muscle just does what the nervous system, like that's all nonsense as well. That the muscle talks back to the nervous system. Muscle talks to the liver, muscle talks to the gut. So we now
What
have
is
new
it saying?
markers. Mark, you're weak as shit.
Hey, dude, we need some carbs.
It sends
that's what your
signals.
Some
muscles
glucose in this motherfucker.
Yeah, like well, for example, that's okay. Here's a good one. How do you think diabetes works? Like, do you think the pancreas secretes and tells what muscle to do? Well, partially, but more importantly, muscle is what tells the pancreas, hey, we're getting low in sugar. Give us some sugar.
Yeah.
But the pancreas doesn't function properly in diabetics, so they have all these problems. So that actually is coming from a muscle issue.
Yeah.
That's muscle getting there. I was part of my PhD. We had to go through med school, and we went through the whole like 2 weeks of classes, which 2 weeks of med school classes is like 3 textbooks. It's crazy. You take one class at a time. It's 4 hours a day. Like it's insane.
Wow.
And the guy who was teaching it was a PhD, not an MD. And I was the only non-MD in there. And we get to the end, and he's going through, we're just like hours of drugs to treat this and drugs to treat that. And if you get this and blah, 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 blah. And we get to the end, he's like, oh, actually, like there's one drug that will fix all this diabetes stuff. And it's actually the most efficacious and the most effective treatment that's ever been studied. And this is true, by the way. And he's like, it's fucking exercise. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Like in the back. Why? And then you have to understand, like, the vast majority of your metabolism, people don't understand the hormones that are secreted that tell you to store fat are coming from muscle.
Right.
It is your deposit for amino acids. So all of your amino acids, all of them that you keep in your body are stored in muscle.
The hormones are being produced by the muscle. Is that what you said?
That's exactly. Well, the building blocks for the hormones are being held in the muscle.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So the amino acids. So this is very easy to understand and fairly quick. When you eat too much fat, it gets stored as fat.
Right.
Okay, nothing complicated there. When you eat too much carbohydrate, it's either stored in the blood, liver, or muscle as carbohydrate, or it's stored as fat. Like nothing difficult. But when you eat excess protein, that gets broken down into amino acids. Some of that, but a very small amount, will be stored as fat. But the most of that will actually be stored in muscle as amino acids. And amino acids are the building block for, of course, all of your proteins.
Right.
But they're also the building block for all of your hormones, because hormones are proteins too. They're also the building block for all of your immune cells. Those are proteins too. Your hair cells, your brain cells, all these are actually built off of amino acids. So if you don't have sufficient muscle, you don't have the supply to build any of that shit. Right. So you're in real big trouble. So
you're really behind, you know. It's when we look at other people and we admire some of these people that have these great physiques and stuff. It's like almost a little bit of a rich gets richer concept where it's like they're already doing well, and then you see them eating pizza and you're like, I don't understand how they do that. Yeah. And it's like, well, because like maybe even pizza maybe you can make an argument occasionally for them to do that it's actually like really good for them because the amount of muscle mass they have, the amount of calories, and a lot of people that have a good physique are probably a little overboard with their dieting from time to time and so on. And so when somebody is their body fat percentage is really high, it's like, man, it's hard to just get that fucking momentum going.
Exactly. You don't have as much wiggle room.
Right.
So like, do you go out of your way to eat a pizza? No, of course. But if you do have pizza or whatever your thing is, you got a lot of room to spare because your body is what we will call metabolically flexible. And that's one of the things that, like we were talking before the show, the problem when people get super dogmatic about their training or their nutrition is if you put yourself to one end of the spectrum, you lose flexibility.
Right.
So if you maximize, like Chris, he maximized his powerlifting, and he thought he had to be 370 pounds, but it wasn't until the end he realized, like, I can't walk to the fucking door without being out of breath.
Right.
He compromised his conditioning, his cardiovascular conditioning.
Which I don't think we really realize because we're like in it. That
you realize it, but you don't care because you're so close to that big ass goal.
Yeah,
Right.
but we're also compromising our strength.
Yeah.
Then that's something
Ultimately,
that I try to preach to people. It's like I would have been stronger if I was more fit when I was bigger.
Yeah,
There's no question.
Especially by the end of a meet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like like your deadlift was an issue the whole time you were competing, and it's you were gassed by the end of every
fucking
meet.
Exhausted by the time I got to the last event, and it wouldn't have been that hard to mix in some sprint work here and there, some just generally light cardio. I could have been around the same size, but I could have also been a little bit leaner, and I could have been more productive. I could recover from my workouts faster. You recover from set to set and from rep to rep faster.
If you did one conditioning workout every other week in your powerlifting career, like that doesn't change much of your training.
Right.
But boy, that really builds an impact. I just had, I've got some weightlifters at my weightlifting club.
It's hard to realize that. You think you got?
I just made them do this deal, dude. So go into a treadmill and put it up as high as it can. Ideally, like 12 to 15%.
Yeah.
And put it at for men about 8 miles per hour, for girls about 6 miles per hour.
8 miles an hour.
That's pretty quick.
And see how long you can go. How long do you think you could run? Up 15 degrees.
Man, I would be very lucky if I made it probably over like 30, 40 seconds, I think.
Yeah, that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
And
a minute, like, I mean, I'd have to really want it, maybe. I don't know. That would be hard. That'd be hard to make a minute.
So a minute is a good number to go there. And I had some of our weightlifters do that, and they're like weightlifters, powerlifters, and they're lasting 20 seconds. And then I have some of the just normal people, what's that acronym for, like the non-athletic regular people? NARPs? Yeah, NARPs, there you go. And they're crushing a minute and a half, like a minute 45. And I'm like,
wow.
And they're like, well, I'm on powerlifting. I'm like, yeah, you are. And look how unfit you are.
Yeah.
You don't think a little bit of an improvement in your conditioning wouldn't help you? And they were like, you could tell like the wheels were turning. They're like, shit, because it was easy. They don't like to do the conditioning. And they like to do the strength stuff. So they could get motivated for that. But I'm like, and that's the exact comments I made. Like, look how much would enhance your recovery, your long term.
Boring.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose all my gains.
It's not boring if you push a sled until you throw up after 20 seconds.
No.
That's not very boring, right?
How long are the duration? I mean, I know it really depends on how, what exactly you're doing, but, you're mentioning, some of these people lasting 30 seconds or so. There's probably different protocols for different things depending on exactly what you're doing. But just in terms of, conditioning and having a better like VO2 max type of deal.
Yeah.
What parameters kind of loop around that?
I would say if that's the case, is you don't have a very specific and goal in mind. If you're just trying to be generally a little more fit,
and breathe a little bit better,
then you should do a combination.
Okay.
Like maybe start off by once a week, you're going to go for an hour-long walk.
Right.
All right, that's probably going to make your heart rate go up 10%, 20%. Okay, well then some days maybe do a 30-minute light row. So do 10 minutes light on the rower, 10 minutes on the Aerodyne, and 10 minutes on the VersaClimb. Okay, fine.
Right.
Some days do, intervals where it's, 3 minutes as hard as you can, 5 minutes of recovery, and do 2 rounds of that.
Right.
And then sometimes do 30 on, 30 off, or 30 on, 2 minutes. And if you just kind of mix and mash those things, that's going to do enough to keep you generally
do like a 50
fit.
rep set of some light deadlifts or something.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And do 2 or 3 rounds of it.
But the issue is to keep doing something in that realm all the time.
Exactly.
Because that's
exactly right.
We were going to talk about technology at some point, I'm sure, because you have a whole book on it.
Yeah.
But I noticed
wearing a Fitbit, bro?
I'm wearing a Fitbit.
I'm done here. We're out. Did you not read the book?
I read the book.
I'm just kidding.
After I already bought the Fitbit.
Take it back.
I actually I've very specific reasons that I have it. And
no, that's okay.
One of them is that it's a watch. So anyway,
because it matches your eyes.
Because it matches my eyes. Yes, and
your complexion.
It's actually it's black, so it's the color of my soul.
Oh, that's what my wife says. Natasha.
But I noticed that like whether or not you feel that the resting heart rate is correct, at least you're measuring the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing a lot more conditioning stuff, I see very dramatically, very quickly how fast my resting heart rate goes down. Yep. And then if I don't do it for a week, it starts to rise. It's very obvious.
So a very easy thing for a powerlifter would be, okay, you've got usually, depending as little as 2 minutes between attempts on a platform for you?
Yeah, it would be really, really rare, like in a competition, to have anything less than probably 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay, so let's say 5 minutes, but I've also seen people like it's 30 minutes sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It can be a big flight. It can be a long time.
Yeah. So what happened? One of the first national meets I ever did in weightlifting, I didn't anticipate that. So I was training with 5-10 minutes between each rep.
Yeah.
Right, because I wanted to maximize strength. Well, that was all good and great until the first time I had to follow myself 3 times in a row. I missed my opener, like just a weird like mess. And then I didn't realize nobody was there. So I had my 2 minutes to go. And I was like, I was kind of a little out of breath, a little bit nervous. I was on stage. It was elevated. Like the crowd was below me. I was like a little bit here. Missed the second one. It's like kind of technique. Well, with the third one, I'm gassed. Like I'm completely gassed. So for national championships, I made sure as hell I was absolutely ready to take a max effort every 2 minutes, no matter what. So for powerlifting, maybe you move that window to 5 minutes. Okay, no problem. So I would do about once a week, I would do like 20 sets of 1 or 2 at basically like an opener and set a running clock that banged every 2 minutes. And I didn't matter what I did set up, how much time I took to recover, like that thing went every 2 minutes regardless. And but that wasn't my only training.
Right.
Like my other day, so that was Monday. Wednesday when I came in, it was 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever, and really taking the number up there. Because on the Monday session, I was working on just my ability to repeat that maximal effort. Wednesday, I was actually trying to get stronger. And those are different things, but that don't have to be, like mutual exclusivity is important to understand here. That like we can do both of those a little bit. And I would say if I was lifting 5 days a week, I was only doing that like conditioning piece 1 day a week. That still gave me 4 days to get really strong and powerful and all that stuff. And it's not that difficult to, like, I wasn't drastically changing my training where I got like just sore out of my mind or was throwing up. But just a little change like that. When I walked into national championships, I was so much more fit. It was ridiculous.
Ed Cohn talks about the fact that when he started powerlifting, that system is the system they used.
Really?
Yes. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We don't use that round system. We use I don't know what it's called, but like you go through an entire flight of attempts and then you start from
competition.
In competition.
Right. Oh yeah.
Used to be that that you had to follow yourself.
Yeah. Now it's by weight, right? Yeah.
So back to getting jacked.
Yeah.
Back to kind of gaining muscle mass. Couple tips.
Because you have keeping us on task there, man. I was totally in another place.
Oh, that's okay.
This is, man, it's like you do this for a living.
Yeah.
Host. Okay, so one of the ones would be making sure that carbohydrate. One of the things that most people don't realize is carbohydrate, of course, powers your exercise. People realize that.
Right.
But it is also the direct fuel for protein synthesis. Signaling process. So if you look at basic...
Why is protein synthesis important?
Or Segagenesis is...
Yeah. That's what I emailed them.
What the hell are you talking about?
Segagenesis.
Yeah. I think you were talking about gluconeogenesis.
I was.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
I was just throwing it in there just to be stupid.
Yeah. So what actually happens is, in order to grow muscle, it's a 3-step process. So number 1, the cell actually has to be stimulated somehow. And those are little proteins that go from the outside of the cell, and they talk to the nucleus. And the nucleus is what holds your DNA. So those have to be activated. The second thing is the DNA has to be activated, which is called gene expression. So you express the genes that code for the protein that make up your bicep. Right. So you have a gene there that says like grow bicep. Well, it's just sitting there dormant though.
Right.
If you challenge it, it's going to say, hey, replicate, come back, add more proteins that make me bigger. But then the actual final step is that protein synthesis process. So when you break a bond between an atom, that gives off energy in this context. Well, when you want to put two together, that takes energy. So if you have a bunch of amino acids floating around in your bicep and you want to put them together to make a protein, to make a bigger arm, that actually requires you put some energy into the system. And in this case, it's almost always carbohydrate.
Right.
So that is the most direct and most effective method of stimulating
and it's because
growth.
Carbohydrates are kind of fast, right? Like I know there's a difference in carbohydrates, but breaking down fat and protein, I would imagine takes a little longer. It's a little
protein
longer
would be deleterious in this situation, right? Like they'd be counterproductive to what we're trying to do.
Right.
Fat takes a lot longer. Fat also is mobilized from the entire body,
right?
Whereas carbohydrate is used almost exclusively locally. So it's coming from the actual muscle. So you store carbohydrate, in this case, right in the bicep, where fat is going to have to come from your toe and your ear and.
Is it that direct? So if you did,
absolutely,
if you did a bunch of curls for the day, then you technically, possibly that your biceps would need carbs.
Not even like technically, exactly.
Yeah,
totally.
Okay.
In fact, we can easily biopsy you. I can biopsy your deltoid or your tricep or your quad or whatever.
Right.
Measure muscle glycogen, how much sugar is in the muscle. Biopsy, you can do your workout, biopsy again, and I can tell you exactly what percentage of glycogen you've lost.
Right.
And so that needs to be repleted somehow. Sugar, this is a very easy way to get around this. And I don't necessarily, when I say sugar, I don't mean like crappy sugar. I mean good carbohydrate.
Yeah, right.
Potato, whatever, vegetable. Or it can use fat eventually as a fuel. And this is why people can survive on things like a ketogenic diet.
Right.
Because you can learn to go through gluconeogenesis, break down fat, generate it as a fuel. It's just a lot slower. It's an extra step.
Right.
Now, once you're adapted to it, maybe fine, but it is a little bit slower.
Right.
In theory. So getting the carbohydrate in is going to most likely, for most people, help you maximize gains. This is why I think you'd find, although you can find some, the vast majority of bodybuilders are using carbohydrate.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like,
I think almost all of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Like,
and there's a few guys that kind of tout that they go low carb, but I think they're embellishing on what they're really doing a little bit. I don't know why. I don't know exactly why, but I mean, for myself, you know, I've explained this many times over. One of the main reasons why I've chose a ketogenic style diet, I've been doing them since like 1994 on and off to lose weight. It's worked every single time. How healthy is it? And like, I don't really know, you know, but I also don't know how healthy it is to be a power lifter.
Sure.
You know, and I've done that for years, you know,
Or to
like
run your own business
I do
or
a lot
whatever.
of stuff that could be like risking, you know, years off my life.
Or just carrying around more mass, period.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it went all
yeah.
the way up to
Oh, yeah.
330 bills, you know, so.
Or even now, because I mean, obviously you're above average weight for somebody your height because of all the muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always.
What are you
I've always
about,
reverted-
210 right now, 215?
I'm 205. You know, I've always reverted back to it because it's always been effective. And the main reason why I do it is I don't do well if I eat carbohydrates, it makes me want to eat shit. It makes me want to eat shitty carbohydrates. So if I even just have, it gives me too much freedom and too much leeway. I don't seem to do well based off of that. So I will get myself to a point where I'm going to start to mix in some more carbohydrates. But I'm also experimenting too. I'm trying to see, you know, the deeper I go into ketosis, how much does it matter?
Right.
If I have cheat meals, am I still registering blood ketones? And I'm just kind of poking around with a lot of these different things. But what I've noticed from a lot of people is it's not specific. It's not so specific to a specific diet or anything. What I'm recognizing in people, people are addicted. You know, people are addicted to. We have an overabundance of chips and candy and ice cream and processed foods, and I'm not against any of that. Like I love it all. Like I'm gonna, and that's why when I do this diet, when I abstain from carbohydrates,
Sure, it's easier to rules.
right?
Yeah.
And once I get into a rhythm of eating the fat and protein, the cravings aren't there. And when somebody puts bread in front of me, boom, I'm like, can't have it.
Yeah.
You know, I can immediately like disassociate myself with it. Not part of my plan.
Right.
You know, red meat, vegetables, oils, those kinds of different butter, like that's all part of my thing. But anything else you put in front of me, it's like I'm not doing that because it's not part of what I'm currently doing.
There's a difference between truth at the individual truth level and implementation. Right? So we could look at the science of ketogenics, doesn't matter, okay? And we could say there's a fundamental truth that it works, doesn't work, it doesn't even matter. But how that actually is implemented in an actual person is not necessarily the same thing. It can be, but it can also be extremely different. And so someone could look at you and say like, oh, Mark, haven't you seen the data on what? Like, yes, but you just expressed a very good reason for saying, I understand that is true, but in my implementation, my life, it doesn't work for me. And this is why I hate people who get extremely dogmatic about nutrition for that exact rule. Like you can say, for example, sugar, right? Like, okay, if you look at the individual truth of like what Gary Taubes says, okay, he's massively wrong on the major portion of what he says.
Does he hate sugar?
Yeah.
Okay.
But as a fundamental policy, it's not the worst thing to say, people.
Yeah.
Like if we walk around saying like sugar is actually bad and sugar causes all these health problems, okay, well, all the things he's listing for the most part aren't true. But if the message that gets out to people is, hey, maybe we should eat less sugar. Well, now, like
that ends up having a positive effect on a lot of people, like right away, without knowing into the underlying science, without.
Exactly. It's easy to implement.
Right.
And a lot of people like those just easy rules. I don't want to think about it. All I know is I don't eat carbs. Okay, fine. My view is, okay, can you use that then, have success for 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is. Now we can actually have a secondary conversation that says, well, let's actually revisit carbohydrate.
Right.
Okay, let's see which ones you don't do well on. Let's take Rob Wolf's approach. Let's do some testing. Okay, fine, great. But if it took you those initial rules of walking and going, Mom, that's it. You're not eating any more carbs.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And then actually she saw success for 5 months. Well, maybe that's not the worst thing ever.
Right.
And that,
I also
bad.
like it as a form of like a reset,
Sure.
resetting your metabolism a little bit. Like, let's just get you, even if you just did it with certain foods. I know some people say like, stuff that's white, like so white bread and sugar, and you just abstain for that for a little while. And you kind of reset your body to be prepared. Again, what you said about training, be prepared for whatever it is you're about to do next.
Yeah. Well, it drives me nuts when you take this same exact idea, and I won't tell you the context behind it, and I'll give you one context and it sounds ridiculous, and another context it sounds totally normal. Right? Like one thing the rest of your life. If I told you to be on one training program, you're gonna do 5-3-1, repeat it the rest of your life. Like you'd look at me like you're like, what? Why would you? Weather would be like, what? That's stupid. Don't ever do that. That is insane. But yet, if I said nutrition, people are like, yes, that's what I do. I do keto. I'm going to do that the rest of my life.
What if I went to you and said you're going to be with one woman the rest of your life?
Yeah, exactly.
I think all three of us fell victim to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like, well, why can't I go keto for 3 months? And then I'm going to go vegan, or I'm going to go low protein, or I'm going to go original paleo, and I'm going to like, why can't you? You have to do one the rest of your life? It doesn't make any sense. So we do that too. Like we'll go through periods of going, hey, you know what? We're going to go protein starving a little bit. We're going to go really low protein for a while. Let's challenge those systems. Okay, now we're going to go really high carbohydrate.
And that sounds asinine, from years ago. What does that show? There's some of the testing with starving off your protein a little bit.
So if you look at it again, it's all about context, right? So if you're 6 weeks out from a competition, I probably wouldn't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Or change anything.
Don't
change anything. In the last
seriously.
6 weeks, you're an
Keep
idiot.
shit similar.
Don't change things the morning of. Like, don't have that extra scoop of C4. Like,
and
Jesus,
we've all been guilty of it, and we've seen it time and time again. People change their stance, they change their shoes, they change their grip, they change all kinds of stuff because you're in a panic.
Minimize distraction.
You're like, I want to be the best, and you're all fired up, and it doesn't work.
So it would be the same thing. But if you say you're in a health benefit and you're just like, I'm just kind of like working out, but I don't have a competition coming up or whatever. Well, why not challenge your body? In fact, since I'm kind of co-hosting right now, I'll transition into the book, which is a beautiful transition here. Like this is one of the basic concepts of the book is to say, well, we actually need to strive to mix up the stress on the body. And so we can go through periods of hunger. You've said you mess with some fasting.
Yeah, I love it.
Yep, me too. Like
it feels effective, and I don't do it every day. And if I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, I'm hungry, I fucking eat breakfast.
Right.
Yeah.
Fuck the rules. I don't need a bunch of rules to weigh me down. I just,
And it gets easier until it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like there's a moment you're like, okay, it's just been too long.
Yeah, I think some fasting for people would be tremendous, just to starve off the hunger a little bit, because I don't think people really know. They're just hungry just because they're fucking hungry. They're bored.
Exactly. That's one of the major points in the book. Is like, do you actually understand what your body's telling you? Right. Because you've probably unplugged from your own brain for so many years, and you've outsourced that to habit. You've outsourced that to behavior. You've outsourced that to my clock. You've outsourced that to your technology in these cases. Well, let's actually step back. And I think things like cold exposure, fasting are fantastic ways to say, like, do you really feel cold right now? Are you really hungry? Or is your stomach grumbling? Or are you just like bored?
Yeah.
Well, maybe fasting for 12 hours is enough for people to realize, like, actually, I fasted for 12 hours and my stomach was really grumbling, but actually, like, I didn't crash against the floor and like pass out.
Yeah.
Well, and how healthy is it to make your mind stronger?
It's a physical challenge.
Like, accept more.
Why not? Why when someone comes to me and says, I'm not going to eat anything white for a month. Like, why do we meet that with anything besides, hey, that's fantastic. I'm glad you're challenging yourself.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, like, why is it like, bro, like, come on, like, you're an idiot.
You know the research about sugar, it's not unhealthy.
Yeah. Like, why? Like, who cares? Like, I've set a challenge. I can set a training goal. Why can't I set a nutrition goal? Right. Like, who cares if it's perfect? Then 3 months, go back to it.
And think about it this way. Like, we can't really recreate the diet of our ancestors that climbed out of the trees, but we can recreate the conditions of their feast and famine.
Sure.
Pretty easily by either eating or not eating.
Okay, so however long we've been around as a species, 200,000, 2 million years, doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay. We evolved entirely, the 100% of our own goal as a species was to minimize stress at all times. So we build houses because we don't get hot and cold as much.
Yeah.
and we build farming so we have more access to food, and we build tribes so that it's easier to figure out who's safe and who's not safe so we can reproduce. Like everything is about reducing stress. Well, the shitty part about it is like that was a great strategy until about 5 years ago. It's like, oh fuck, we won.
Yeah.
Oh,
we've reduced all those variables to almost
shit,
nothing.
everyone's really fat.
Yeah. Well, now we have this amazing thing.
Now we have what I call fake exercise, which is this gym.
Exactly, right?
Artificial exercise.
We had so 30 years ago we had to replace physical activity because physical activity in the work life was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we had to engineer physical activity. Well, now we have to engineer exercise because those are sort of different things, because now we don't even pick up heavy things, we don't move these things, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is the time right now that we have to engineer maybe some hunger.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to engineer thermal stress. Like, how often are you really that cold? Are you really that hot? When's the last time you really got thirsty? Like, let's talk about hydration, right? I get dehydrated all the time. Really? Maybe not. Maybe it's good to be a little bit dehydrated occasionally.
Right.
And then you got to meet that with massive hydration on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about sleep. When's the last time you slept for 2 hours a night, 3 nights in a row?
Right.
But then also, at the same token, when's the last time you slept for 12 hours, 3 nights in a row? So,
Never.
Yeah,
So-
exactly, right? So all this stress, we have to look at the stresses of the body and saying, okay, when's the last time you did something heavy? Oh, it's been a while. It's time to go back to something heavy. When's the last time you did something that was long and sustained? If you haven't done anything that's 30 minutes consecutively of exercise for 10 years, like that's probably a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
If you haven't ever tried to jump high, if you haven't had to try to rotate, if you haven't tried to touch your toe, like we have to look at the bodies, all the stress, because the world that we live in, and if you think it's bad now, give it 10 more.
Yeah.
Like we're in trouble.
Reminds me of that commercials from the 70s. It was about physical fitness, and this sort of faceless drone carries a TV box in, and there's a talking head on it, and the guy is, and I don't mean like he's on the screen, and he's reciting like equations or whatever, and then he's done, and it's time for him to go, and he's like calling for the drone to come and pick him up and take him, and of course the drone's not showing up. He has no ability to move himself because he's just a head in a box.
Right. I mean, if you look at NASA, the whole, trying to get to Mars, you guys have got to realize that's not technology. It's not a rocket problem. It's a physiology problem.
Yeah.
And the only problem they can't figure out is how to induce enough stress.
Really?
That's it. We can't put enough stress on the people there, so their bones are withering away, muscles withering away, organs, vision's going away. We are trying, like all of NASA's efforts from a physical standpoint in the last 30 years has been trying to put enough stress back on the body.
Wow.
And on here on Earth, all we're trying to do is the opposite, and we won.
Yeah.
And we're only going to continue to win more. So if you want to live and you want to live well, you're going to have to figure out a way to replant all these things. And so I love experimenting fasting. I love taking a little bit of protein out for a while.
Right. I know
Sucks,
Dave
it feels
Asprey has
terrible,
talked about that a little bit. And what does that cause in your body? It actually can cause a pretty positive response, right? To fast off of protein a little bit.
Absolutely. It's going to be very similar
I
to...
thought like we need 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. We need to have 400 or 500 grams of protein a day.
Well, let's go back to what we talked about earlier. And I said, let's look at the lens in which we're looking at that number from.
Right.
Right. And that lens is probably...
Bob Hoffman.
Right, you're trying to maximize performance, right?
Right.
And if you're trying to maximize performance and or muscle growth, those are pretty good prescriptions. But in the book, I have a section that calls like optimizing versus adapting. You can't do both at the same time. If you're optimizing, you're peaking for competition. You got your 200 grams of protein in or whatever it's going to be. Like you're resting all day, you're doing all that, and you are going to peak.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're peaking for that month, what are you not doing? You're not adapting. Well, if you're adapting the whole time, you're not peaking either. And so we have to go through these phases.
The best program is the one you're currently not doing.
Yeah, right?
Isn't that a motherfucker?
Yeah, right?
What should I be doing? You should be doing the opposite of whatever you're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck, I just started doing it 3 months ago. Exactly. It's time for a change.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we need to go through these phases of saying, okay, you want to improve your ability to process protein. Maybe we should go through a little bit of a phase where we take it away.
Take it away. That makes sense.
Why? Oh, because now our body actually learned all the enzymes, the hormones, the regulation of processing protein needs to maybe be reset a little bit. Okay.
So your body had this influx of protein all the time. Now
for
it's
20
not
straight
getting
years, you've had 2 grams of
Right.
protein per pound. Now let's take it away for a little
You
bit.
don't have to shit in a bathtub anymore.
Exactly.
You can poop in a regular toilet.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to break the porcelain anymore with your dope when it hits the wall. But it would be the same thing with carbohydrate, with fat. Okay, well, let's take away some carbohydrate for a time. What's going to happen to performance? Well, it's probably going to go down the shitter. Okay. But maybe, like you said earlier, maybe for some of us, we've become so reliant upon carbohydrate. That doesn't mean carbohydrate is bad. But if we are over consuming it for 20 years, maybe it won't hurt us to take 3 months off of carbohydrate or a month.
Right.
Like, was that really going to be a big deal? You've over-influxed yourself on something for 35 years.
Carbohydrates might be more effective when they come back, and
They'll
same thing with
definitely
the
be
protein,
more effective.
right?
Exactly. And the same thing would be fat, right? Take that stuff away for a little bit or go low or whatever, right? Like take your water away for 2 days. Come back, boy, that water's going to taste very good.
Yeah.
Right?
True enough.
So the same thing. So whether it's habitual or it's hormesis or it's toxicity or it's adaptation, these are all the conversations that we need to be having, saying like, we finally live in this place of abundance that we've never had before. We actually have to start developing strategies to deal with abundance.
What are some things you've seen recently that you've been experimenting with, or something that has really shocked you, or even just throughout your career? Has it been something where you went, holy fuck, I didn't know that?
Yeah, well, actually, I would say all the fasting stuff. I used to be very, very against all that.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck?
Made no sense.
This is stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is completely asinine. Don't eat. Why are we telling people not to eat? I don't
I'm
get
gonna
it.
lose all my gains.
Yeah.
All my muscles gonna be gone.
Yeah,
I'm gonna wake up
I want
tomorrow
them
morning.
gains. I want to be jacked.
I'm gonna be a
I want to be tan.
135-pound weakling.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, yeah. So that was a big one. The cold was a big one too. I'm like, this isn't going to make any bit of difference.
Cold do.
So you have a whole host of physiological cascades that kick off when you get
Except
super
for the
cold.
shrinkage. Unfortunately.
Well,
No
like I said,
photo
if you go
shoots
through
after.
some time of shrinkage, and maybe you can go through some time of
growth.
Ah.
Hey now.
yeah, like that just sold more than anything else in this entire
Exactly.
show.
Yeah,
People
that
are
one.
like, make it cold, make it grow.
Yeah, that one hit.
Wrote it down. Done.
But you've got entire proteins in your body called cold shock proteins. Their entire existence is to be there to help you manage when you get super cold.
I would never have guessed that.
How
That's
the fuck's
crazy.
our body like? So you just
Well, think about it. How
it's
long
like
did you
fucking
live
prepped
cold?
for everything, right?
How long did you live cold?
Yeah.
Like whatever, hundreds of thousands of years,
Yeah.
right? And now all of a sudden in a 30-year, I mean, think about it. Like maybe your generation, certainly your parents, definitely our parents' generation. How many of them went to Vietnam, went to Korea, went to World War II, and got cold as shit for
Right.
months on end?
Yeah.
Like now you go outside and can't handle 15 minutes in a cold water.
Yeah, right.
And these dudes were living in mud pits
Or
for
if
4
it's
months.
60 and windy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, fuck, it's cold out here.
Or,
Yeah.
or when the summer kicks in here in Sacramento at the beginning, we're all dying.
Oh.
Yeah,
All
and you're
dying.
so
First-
miserable because it's 92 in here.
Yeah.
and it's a little bit stuffy, and you're complaining like little like
Yeah.
come on. Like if you can't handle those things, you have the physiology to do it. Like I mean, the food one is a way to give you a very easy example. So how long do you think you literally could go without food before you died?
I've heard of people going like almost like a year. I want to say.
Yeah, I don't know what the number is, but quite a while. Depends on what your stores look like when you got started. That
right.
way,
So if you're 130
fatty,
pounds and 8% body fat, it's
Yeah.
gonna be different. But there was a Scottish gentleman that went about 385 days. And he
Was
was
the
like
guy who
400
lost like
pounds.
200 pounds or whatever?
Exactly, lost 185 pounds, right? So let's just back.
But he did
we'll
like
call it
a
half of that.
clinical fast or something. He was supervised or something like that.
Yeah, he
Is
was in
that
a
right?
hospital all the time.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was getting electrolytes.
So
and
it's not
water.
just some dude who's like, I'm not going to eat for a year.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But let's back that off. Call it half. Call it a third. Call it a tenth. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So let's call it a tenth.
30
You could-
days. Yeah.
30 days.
It's a long ass time.
You could go. You have the physiological ability to go. All of us 5 days without food. Easy.
I guess the show Survivor, right? Like they every single person loses a bunch of weight, right?
Yeah.
ton, right? And they're all like
It's not that
Fine.
they're not eating, but they have rare
very low
opportunities,
calories,
yeah.
right? So we have this in-tune ability to handle all of these stressors, cold being another one of them, right? And I'm not certainly saying
It's
going on
fucking
Survivor
wild
diet.
to fast for 30 days, you know?
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend that one,
Right.
but you could do.
But you could. You
You could
be
do. You could start off with 12 hours.
I did 17, 18 yesterday. Wasn't that hard.
Okay.
You know,
What was the
every
actor,
couple
a famous
weeks.
actor? He got real thin for a film, and his ribs
Oh,
were all showing.
Was it Christian Bale?
Christian Bale for the
Machinist?
yeah, I mean, he
Machinist?
must have done
Something
some.
like that? Machinist, I think?
Machinist.
Yeah, he must have done some crazy. That was wild the way he
I don't
ended up
know.
looking.
He
And
might have
then-
been super. That was the craziest thing, right?
That was
His-
wild.
His rebound was for Batman.
He was on
Begins.
that bulk, but again, you know,
Yeah.
back to what you were saying earlier. Yeah, the rebound off of cutting out carbs for a while, they'll be more effective when you put them back in, and the protein and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So if someone has the ability to do it for 30 days, I think I have a hard time listening to you complain when you miss lunch and you're all cranky.
Yeah.
Really, if that's happening, first of all, it's probably not. It's more habitual.
Right.
And if it is hormonal, if it is blood sugar related, how weak is your physiology?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the absolute number.
No,
it's
it
how
doesn't
your
matter at all.
body reacts to that number.
That's exactly right.
Through my wife's family down to one of my kids, they are all very sensitive to blood sugar starting to drop. It's not the absolute number. They get cranky as fuck, and it isn't habitual. It's literally like my son as a child. You could see it happening. He's like, well, when was the last time he ate? It's like, oh.
Feed the beast.
Yeah, famous story. My my older son, we were talking about my younger son. Like, what happened? What is going on with him? When was the last time he ate? It's like, oh, the puppy ate his lunch and his breakfast. It's like, okay, he hasn't eaten all day. In other words, it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, well,
That's why he's grumpy.
yes,
Yeah,
now
weird.
we know what's going on. And one of those times we actually like checked his blood sugar and stuff. It's like, no, it's not super low. It's just his body's perception of the drop.
That's exactly right. I mean, kids are a little bit different story, and females are too. Like, it's pretty clear evidence now that
Females
suggests
are a way different story.
females just don't
Can't
respond well to
figure 'em out,
keto.
right?
Yeah.
Even all the science can't figure them out.
No idea.
They don't respond well to keto. Is that what you said?
Not it doesn't look like nearly as well as men do.
Yeah, I
they
know
don't
that-
respond well to fasting as well as men.
They
do
don't
either.
process alcohol as well either. They don't have the enzymes to
Well, it
deal with
depends
alcohol.
on what you define by processing.
The date rape drug either. I mean, it's hard for them to really deal with
It's
that.
just they just
Their
they feel like
butts hurt in
shit.
the morning. It's a whole process, whole thing.
Yeah. But then that's a great example of saying, well, that's something maybe we can work on. So, I mean, literally, if you're a 35-year-old male out there, 25, and you get cranky after 3 hours of not food, like Kelly Starrett always says, like, you're fucking precious.
yeah.
Like, don't be so precious. Like, don't be, you're a liability. Like, if you're out there and we're trying to do something and I have to stop every 20 minutes for you to eat and get your thing in, like, if you got a competition coming up, fine. But if that's how you live all your life for 20 years at a time, you are a liability.
Yeah.
And we need to maybe spend a little bit of time working on the other end of that spectrum just so that you're a little bit more flexible. So you should be able to derive energy from carbohydrate. You should be able to derive energy from fat. And if you're stuck on one or the other end of the spectrum and you're not specifying or specializing for a sport, then you maybe have a problem. And you need
If
something
you're
to
going
work
to
on.
implement something like fasting, do you tell somebody, you know, hey, given your history, you never tried it before. Let's the first time we mess around with it, hey, you know, this Tuesday, let's have you fast for like 12 hours, and then maybe next week we'll try like a 14. Let me know how you felt, and then let's not even talk about what's next, but let's see how you felt, and then we'll go from there.
Yep, and that's exactly what I do. And the
Couple
two other
steps,
pieces
right?
of advice I give them is, number one, pick it on a day when you are actually very busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, don't do it on Saturday when you're watching college football all day.
it's tough.
That's
yeah.
gonna be the worst
You're like,
experience.
I want
ever.
fucking potato chips.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you're sitting on your ass in front of a screen, you want to eat.
Not gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah, pick it on a day where you got to run around. I got to go to the grocery store, or I got to go to the post office and do this, and then I got to run over and I got this call, and then like for me, it's don't maybe necessarily do your high creative work or your really important decision. You got to make that final decision. Like do the other stuff, like get back to that person here, like all the busy work.
Right.
And that 12 hours is gonna fly by. And then the second thing would be really pay attention during that fast. What are you feeling like? Like, oh, I feel like I'm okay. Am I really hungry? Or do a little workout. Like, do a workout. You realize, like, oh, actually, I don't feel that bad.
Yeah, sometimes while you're fasting, you work out, you feel amazing.
I feel great sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah.
I feel terrible.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, but these are the things to start to pay attention
But your
to.
body forces your blood sugar up when you're
Exactly.
working out.
Has there
anyway,
been
right?
anything?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Has there been anything with the fasting that you found to be effective? Branched chain amino acids, ketones, or
So you
supplemental,
can-
whatever.
You can do all those things. If you're going to
Seems
do
like
this,
electrolytes seem to be pretty important.
yeah, well, water is the big one, right? So people
Right.
don't necessarily realize how much water they're getting from their food, as well as the salt.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if you're eating animal product that is going to have naturally a bunch of salt in it, and then you take that out, that's going to be a problem. So you're going to have to drink a lot more water. Now, you can fast with all of those things. I actually don't like that, with one exception. Like if this is something you do habitually, fine, you can add it in. But if you're doing it for these purposes, like we just got done talking about, I don't like it. I don't like people to have fat because now you just added calories. You've just defeated a huge portion of. But maybe that's a good starter.
Right.
okay, the first time we try it, let's give you a little bit of fat. It won't feel as bad. You'll kick
The
into
reason
it.
I do it is to augment the overall calories coming from fat.
Right.
So I
So-
start my day with a little bit more fat.
But then you're not really going to a fast.
right.
'cause you
No,
gotta
it's not a
time.
fast by any means. I
Yeah.
don't even consider it a fast.
I don't like it when people. Oh, I shouldn't say. In this circumstance, I don't think you should go for coffee. I don't think you should go for tea. I don't think you should go for keto supplements either, because the whole point, just in this
to
context,
be without.
was to learn to deal without and have your body force your body into a
So it'd
position.
be like if you said you're not going to have any sex, but you're still whacking off.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Just so our audience can understand it. a little
Just so we can relate to you.
Yeah,
you out there. Yeah. Translate it to you people, Doc. This is
Just
layman,
bring,
the LARPs.
just bringing it home right there.
Yeah.
That's
So that's not to say you could never use those things. Now, if you're going to do like a 3-day fast or a 5-day fast, maybe some ketos will help you kind of get started.
yeah.
But if this is when you're really just trying to understand how you really feel, then I don't think that when supplementing those things is as helpful. So to answer your question fully, I do it both ways.
Right.
Sometimes when I fast, I'll have coffee or I'll have fat, or sometimes I'll have other supplements, and sometimes it's a straight up water fast. Not even salt. Sometimes with salt. So it really just depends. Just like we talked about at the very beginning, like when you do anything like this, when you train, when you do any of this stuff, just be conscious of why you're doing it. And then make your decision based on, well, what's the goal of it today?
Yeah.
I mean, if the goal of it is to get faster today, don't do 100 reps in a row to where you get tired. Like, you're not going to get faster. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. This mental flexibility of yours, this is my second reveal of the show. Hopefully you don't already know this.
Oh, God.
But
The first one was pretty gigantic. So
yeah,
I'm kind of nervous right
well,
now.
this one you just sort of you changed the course of a project. All right. Chris Bell, Mark's brother, was going to do a movie on keto, and it was just going to be like balls to the wall, all keto. And then he started listening to you, and he said, "Well, shit. I mean, not actually allowing for the possibility that other methods can be equally efficacious for different people at different points and changing things in and out. That's not where I want to be as a filmmaker. I don't want to be that didactic.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open up the approach. And now the movie that they're making is a broad approach about improving health.
Huh. Wow.
So it's all on you.
So that's what, 30% rights to the checks on that? Is that
I
35?
think it's 100%.
No, okay, I agree. Well, sold. You're a great negotiator.
Yeah.
You know,
Sign you up
the last time that Chris was here,
Wow,
we were
that's amazing.
talking about you coming, and he said, "Oh my God, Andy totally changed how I thought about the movie. He changed my film."
With some stuff, I've had to over a period of time, talk my brother down off the ledge a little bit because he's so excited, right?
Yeah.
So, and you got to consider where he came from. He was, he was an alcoholic and stuff like that, and so he came from that. He came from being really heavy, and the ketogenic diet changed his life, along with being able to shift gears and being sober for the last 3 years. But I said, hey, you know what? Like, just everybody are making a giant mistake whenever we speak in absolutes. We just can't really. Occasionally, maybe you can kind of say just because you're trying to put an exclamation point on something, but for the most part, I can't really say that. My wife's been doing the keto diet with me. She loves the way she feels. She loves, kind of getting rid of junk. She feels her swimming performance is good and on par with the way that she likes to do her workouts and stuff like that. Her and a few of her friends that are following along with the diet, they've lost a couple pounds, but it's been hard for them to navigate. Now, for me, first of all, you said there are some differences male, female, but there's also some differences with me where I will do any and everything, and I'll keep working at it.
Yep.
They're just following a plan.
Yep.
And they're they want to follow the plan to the best of their ability, but they're not going to do 75 different things to make sure it continues to work.
Sure.
So
Not that committed to the thing itself. That's well, actually, another thing we were sort of talking about before we kicked off here is we have to be able to have conversations about information that are independent of emotion.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't help us at all. So if we get fired up and we're more concerned with defending the movement than we are actually discussing it, then we have problems.
So you mean off the internet then?
Yeah, right? Well, it's tribalism, right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, I want to defend powerlifting, or I want to defend, you know, like, I'm sure you have your fans, right? So I want to defend slingshot. Okay, you should use it no matter what. The guy, it's usually actually funny because it's usually never the person who invented it. It's never the person behind it who's saying those things. It's anyone who wants to defend tribalism more than the actual information. And you can't have any conversation about information when you're so worried about protecting that thing. That doesn't help us evolve, because you know what's going to happen eventually. In 5 years, you might go, actually, hey, you know what? Now my elbows are trashed.
Right.
From slingshot. Maybe this is a bad idea.
Yeah, using it all the time, every time you,
You don't know. And so we have to be able to have a conversation and go, hey, like, it's been great for this. This has been fantastic. I've had this thing. This has been great. This is great. Hey, actually, over time, maybe I'm changing my position on this, or now I have a different goal, so now I'm going to go away from that. And that's actually helpful for people instead of confusing people, because the vast majority of the interaction I get from people on the internet is like, dude, I'm so fucking confused. You're saying this, everyone else is saying this. People are saying
the
this.
name of the film is Land of Confusion.
Oh, right.
Because everyone's so fucking confused.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I don't understand.
Are eggs good? Are eggs bad? You know,
oh, Jesus.
You know, cholesterol, salt. Like, I thought salt was bad. I thought fasting was bad. I thought all these things were bad. And now it shifts over to the other side where maybe we're going too far one way as well. Fasting's great. Everyone should do it. You should do it every day for 18 hours. Like, well, maybe we should pump the brakes on that too. Maybe that's not great.
Antithesis, synthesis, right? It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Answers in the middle, yeah.
I mean, like, that's this one just came up the other day.
Went to 10 years of school to learn that. The answer's in the goddamn middle.
Yeah, well,
moderation.
Somebody
never heard of it.
Like, slip that to you a piece of paper, right?
Right. Would have saved a lot of time. I could spend a lot more time lifting and.
Well, you know, where are you going to spend your time? You know, if you're, as a good example, you know, if you're going to school and you're focused in on learning specific things about certain subjects, then you're not going to know as much about another subject.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're spending all your time squatting, maybe to a certain extent, that's not the overall picture of health.
Yep.
You're working on 1 rep maxes and you're not ever changing anything. Everything's all the same. Everything's all similar all the time. You become maybe an expert a little bit in that one spot.
Yep.
But then you know less about everything else.
Well, like I talked about with overload or adaptation, it's the same thing with specificity and variation. Right? So specificity is very, very, very good because you get very good at that very specific task, right? Mm-hmm. But you also compromise about everything else. Variation, on the other hand, you'll be able to handle everything, but you won't get very good at anything. And if we look at like what Louis did with the conjugate, he said, okay, let's actually be extremely specific. We're going to be doing powerlifting every single time, etc. But we're going to introduce maximum variation, but only under certain ground rules, which is, hey, we're just going to change up how you squat, your stance a little bit.
Right.
And that allowed him to stay at a high intensity, plus all the drugs.
Yeah.
Well, and the gear, whatever. But the point is true. Like, but he set himself ground rules of saying we're going to be very, very, very specific, but we have to introduce a little bit of variation, but we're having ground rules for variation.
Yeah.
And a lot allows people to do stuff at a much higher frequency than the rest of us generally could. And so as long as we have those established of where's my built-in variation, how much do I need, and where am I at on the spectrum, but even that variation, in like CrossFit's another example, where like they talk about how it's so varied. Like, really? You do fucking pull-ups, some sort of clean, some sort of deadlift every damn time.
Right.
That's in every workout. That's the same. Like, really, how varied are you? Not very.
The softball tosses and swimming and all that kind of shit
Once every 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen very much.
Yeah, and there's no usually general body weight movement. There's all these things. It's not. I don't care about.
And they don't do any sustained cardio activity at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they do different things now. They do swim, like all this stuff. They do.
But do they ever do a half an hour of anything?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
I think the answer is no, but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, rarely.
Yeah.
I love CrossFit, by the way. It's been fantastic. I'm not bashing CrossFit; they're awesome. But.
With regards to nutrition, it's so hard to really truly see how valuable it is, because it seems to have a greater effect for the longer you implement something, kind of the better. The more you change stuff up, obviously, the better. Things like that. But we've seen it time and time again. Multiple world record holders, and this is powerlifting. So maybe nutrition and powerlifting don't have to have as much synergy as maybe MMA or something like that. But we've seen, and again, I know sometimes it's these genetic anomalies, right?
Yeah,
that are kind of running the show.
okay.
But I mean, we've seen people that literally just eat whatever the fuck they want.
Yep.
And their performance is great.
Yep.
They perform well. So I mean, how much does it really matter for, some of these top level athletes? And again, I know the top level athletes are going to have better genetics. So if they adhere to any form of nutrition and they just even get in the gym at all, it's probably a pretty damn good victory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you asked a question of eternally never know.
Right.
We're never gonna, because the comment would always be, well, how much better would they have been if they ate higher quality food?
But I think also that we're looking at this amount of time.
Yep.
Like if they stay in the sport and they continue to eat the way that they have been, what does it look like after 5 years? What does it look like after 10 years? Are they able to maintain that level of performance? And the answer is usually like no, especially because then if they're in the sport long enough, they have periods of time where they have injuries or whatever, and that changes how much what their workload looks like.
Yep.
But they don't necessarily change their dietary habits.
Yep.
And then they gain weight.
What about like just physically though? What have you seen in some of your research when somebody does do something for half an hour? Does it matter if they ate a bowl of ice cream or if they had a bowl of rice?
Yeah. So I'll put it this way: you're basically asking a question of quality versus quantity, right? And I think again, these are, I don't know how to say this. Like, I think these are bad conversations. I think it's unimportant in terms of why does one have to be more important than the other one? If you think quality doesn't matter at all, you're out of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
If you think quantity doesn't matter at all, you're out of your mind.
Right.
They both matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So where that balance slightly tips back and forth, I don't think it really matters. And like, I don't think that's the most impactful conversation that can be had all the time. Is you're trying to argue into eating ice cream. Right. Okay, if that's the conversation we're having, it's what I call you're trying to minimize the bad instead of maximizing good.
Right.
Like, why not maximize good?
Mm-hmm.
If we're doing anything besides that, now you're fiddle fucking around with like trying to get the least massimal possible. Like, why? That's a conversation you want to have. Go have somebody else. I'm not interested in that.
I see that a lot with the argument for flexible dieting, which I do agree with a lot of the stuff that comes from flexible dieting. But at the same time, I'm like, to me, implementing things like ice cream and things like that, obviously occasionally, right?
Sure. I love it.
But from a mental standpoint, I don't think it's great if you're really trying, like, if you're going to sit here and tell me that you want to be the best in the world at something, or you want to dominate something, you want to kick ass in something, then I can't really listen to your next sentence be about eating pizza. That happened with
exactly.
the CrossFit Games champion the last 2 years, Matt Frazier. The first year that it was one of the documentaries that they did, and he came in second, and he literally, it was that he said like, I will do anything to win, and the next thing's him eating Fruity Pebbles, and I'm sure like, okay, it's like that could be taken out of context or whatever, but I'm like, that guy's not all in.
Yeah.
Then the next year, he is all in. Like, he's all in his nutrition, and I'm sure he still has some flexibility in his diet.
Yeah.
But when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, that could very well be the reason why he's like a little bit stuck, because he was top 5 for the last X years, and then wham, it just came on strong, and maybe he refined that last little bit.
Yeah, like this one blows me away. For some reason, people have this grip on nutrition that they won't let go of in any other area of their life. Like, for example, do you enjoy waking up at 4 a.m. going to work every day? I don't.
No.
Like, do you enjoy having to work out when you're super tired? I don't. Like, do you enjoy having to fight through? Like,
or just even taking a shower.
Yeah. Okay.
Like fucking like just brushing your teeth, or like,
yeah,
just,
like,
you don't want to have to really.
I don't want to pay bills. I don't want to do any of these things. But you know why I do them every day? It's because it's important. So it's the same thing. But I refuse to eat something I don't like the taste of. What? I don't like the taste of driving to work every day. I do that shit. Like, I don't like the taste of dealing in these shitty meetings all day. I do that every day. So, like, again, I'm not interested in those conversations. So I'm saying, like, okay, fine. Now, like, does that mean I don't think you should ever eat fruit? No, of course, like, whatever. But there's a time and place. Sometimes it is hard to get calories in when you're eating only vegetables and stuff. But, like, and I don't think that a bowl of Fruity Pebble for someone like him who is training as hard as he is, like, I don't think that's going to make any difference in his training. Right. But yeah, like, if you're using that as an excuse to dirty bulk or whatever nonsense that is, like, Like you may get there, fine. Like I don't know, but that's just not a conversation I'm interested in having, because you're not, again, your head is not in it to where I'm in it, which is saying like we're trying to minimize level of crappiness instead of saying like, how will we focus on getting in the thing that's going to give you the best results?
Yeah. You said something when you were on Rogan that I thought, and it may not be original to you, and I'm not going to quote it correctly, but about the nature
Well, if it sounds smart, it was definitely original to me.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, then it's definitely
Got it. Okay.
definitely on you. About the goal of science not being to
Yeah, I like that point a lot.
to necessarily define the truth, but to eliminate alternatives, something like that.
Well, you pretty much screwed the pooch on that one.
Yeah, I
but-
did. Sorry.
No, that was pretty much perfect. It's Karl Popper, really. This is a philosopher. He's long since passed, but he basically said, like, the point of science is not to answer truth, but to reduce uncertainty.
Yeah, there we go.
Like, that's all we're really trying to do. So I can't prove to you, and anyone that says, I hate these comments, like, well, this study proved, well, stop you right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, no, it didn't. First of all, you don't have any idea of how sports science works.
Study also, like,
Or
it's just, like,
science,
so
or
broad.
I mean, we could go.
What
I could go
study,
3
how is it
hours
done?
on like science if you
Right.
want, but really, it's all it did is reduce uncertainty a little bit. So if we said, okay, you're going to write a training program, you're going to write a training program, we're going to do a study, 8-week study on 100 people on your side, 100 people on your side, and yours worked out better. Like, it didn't prove that yours works better. It just reduced the unlikelihood that when 200 more people come in, I'm going to probably start most of them in your program. But I have to realize that of those 200, some percentage, 20, 30%, are actually have gone better on Mark's program. The science told me the same thing. Right? So it just reduced the uncertainty. So if I'm going to do a study and try to figure out, what health intervention to give somebody, how to treat somebody's cancer, it is helpful for me to reduce the uncertainty and saying, hey, you're most likely to respond best to this treatment. But you may not respond. I mean, we would literally maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, these things may help.
Yeah, like I'm going to submit a paper for publication. So this is like a sneak preview here. They're not supposed to do this, but it's for you guys.
Hey, now.
Thank you.
Because you told me what Ed said.
Yeah.
I'm still like buzzing from that.
I'm gonna get a hug for that later, I think.
You're going to get more than a hug.
All right.
Whoa.
Sweet.
Wow.
You got any closed off offices?
I'll leave.
This whole thing just took a turn for the better, really.
Yeah. Oh, and so what we did is we looked at, we biopsied both quadriceps, so both fastest lateralis, and we looked at fiber type compositions, how many fast twitch, slow twitch fibers were in both left and right leg of people. And these were pretty strength trained people, not powerlifters, but
People that exercise.
and they specifically strength train, like maybe compete powerlifting, weightlifting a little bit, but they're not.
Gotcha.
Okay. And we also at the same time had them do 1 rep maxes, leg extension of both quads. And we had them do step off of a box, land on 2 independent force plates, and then re-jump in the air. And we had 360 degrees of motion capture analysis to look at knee position, angle, all this stuff. And so what we really tried to do is we tried to tie in like physiology to performance, strength, with like movement analysis. And what we found was, interestingly enough, we found pretty differences between the strength in both legs. Okay, like not particularly a thing, but not a tremendous amount. I think the absolute total was something like a kilo or 2. So like statistically significant.
3%, maybe.
But like,
yeah.
as a coach or somebody lifts, I'm like, okay, if you're 1 kilo stronger in your right leg and left leg, and that's basically the same.
Yeah.
But it came up statistically significant. And so I can position this however I want in the paper. I can say like, look, evidence that people are stronger in one leg than the other one. Or I can say, look, the stats said that I proved their right leg was stronger than their left leg. But let's be real, like one is 69 kilos, one is 70 kilos. Does that really matter?
Right.
I don't think it really does.
Well, and also too, let's say it was significantly more. Like let's say, the left leg was 20 pounds stronger, right, than the right. It's only for that study.
For sure.
It might not necessarily be true
only in those
with
people.
somebody doing a squat.
Yep.
Because
That's exactly
Jim
right.
may, if we're testing him, he may stand a different way to adapt to it, because like maybe his brain
maybe,
knows there's a
maybe one of my calves is 2 inches bigger than the other one.
No
which is
kidding.
true. Yeah.
Right.
Dang.
right. It doesn't necessarily mean the left leg's stronger than the right.
No,
right? Like,
it
Yeah.
doesn't.
So here's where it gets, I think, the next level. And I don't know. I'm going to try this because this is typically not how you do it in science. And I think I'm going to get smacked down by the reviewers, but I'm going to keep trying. So we took those biopsies, and we're the first ones to ever show that the fiber type is different between the 2 legs. So the profile was way different.
Really?
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
So it gets worse though. The right leg was stronger, but the right leg had way more slow twitch fibers in it. The left leg was weaker and had way more fast twitch fibers.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite. The right leg was also much faster. So the right leg was stronger,
Falls along
faster, and had more slow twitch fibers.
Falls along some of the research done on as some of the stuff that I was doing a while back, where you're training really slowly, strength aerobics.
Yeah, right.
Where you're lifting really slow, and some people might think that would not make you explosive or strong, but it can be effective. And there's, obviously you want to train, as we've been talking about throughout the whole podcast. Why not use all, right? Use all the above.
Use all modalities. So, but here's, I think the whole point of why I said that is, I was like, man, that's really weird. I can't believe they're stronger and faster,
really
way more slow twitch. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I started looking at the individual people's data.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was, I think we had 14 people on our study. Although the group, when we average everyone together, because that's how science works, right? And we have one collective number, that came up statistically different. But when we looked at the individual data, I think only 3 of the 14 actually had a stronger right leg and had more slow twitch in it.
Oh, really?
So although a group average, I don't think it actually exists in any single person. Or it's very, very, very rare.
So you don't have anybody who's really like an avatar for your results.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
No, I think there was only one actual person that actually represented a faster knee, a stronger leg, and had more slow twitch in the right leg.
Did you look at any goofy-footed people?
I have no idea. We didn't ask them that.
Okay. I guess that'd be like, that was the first thing that hit my head was like,
we asked them a bunch of questions about which leg would you jump off of, which one you kick a ball with.
Yeah. So
we analyzed the data like all differently depending on how they responded. And we also broke it down by like strongest versus second tier strongest, third strongest.
The problem with a lot of this stuff ends up being is, so these things that are related to type 1 muscle fibers.
Yeah.
And these things are related to type 2 muscle fibers. But what you don't know is what's not related to it yet. Like there might be something that type 1 is explosive, or is that correct?
No,
right?
it's the opposite.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
So type 2 is explosive,
Fast,
and type 1 is more slow twitch, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're going to identify certain truths, whatever you've learned, to those things. But it seems like there's more evidence now, and I don't know the exact mechanism of any of it, but there's so much that's unknown with the slow twitch muscle fibers, and that's where something like strength aerobics, or I'm sure there's a lot of different ways of training it, comes into play, and that can actually, they claim it has even more potential to make you stronger, they think, than the fast twitch muscle fibers.
Well, that's actually, we're one of the few people
we're
one of the few people in the country that actually do that. We actually take biopsies and measure them, and we don't do it in diabetes patients or kidney failure patients. And we tried to actually get funding for almost that exact same study. We just can't get anyone to kick in any money. It's just so hard to raise.
I'll give you $5.
Yeah, exactly. We ran actually a crowdfunding campaign last year and raised a little bit of it.
Yeah.
And then like Renaissance Periodization just donated to us. Like that was awesome.
Yeah, the strength aerobics thing was recommended to me by James Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with any of his work. Super nerdy, super intelligent guy. And when he was like, hey, he's like, just, I don't want to, he gave me some of the science of it. He's like, just look it up. Yeah. And I started to look it up, and I couldn't believe the amount of great information there was on it.
Well, let me blow your mind with a few things about fiber type. So you know how many powerlifters have ever been, and when I say ever, I mean it was published, so we can read it. You know how many powerlifters have ever been biopsied?
Probably 3.
0.
0?
Do you know how many weightlifters have ever been biopsied?
0.
About 6.
Okay.
You know how many female athletes, strength athletes? 0.
0.
It's something crazy like 50 total anaerobic female athletes have ever been biopsied for fiber type. Like we just know nothing about the female fiber type, and we know nothing.
What is the issue with trying to get stuff like that going?
No one will pay for it. I have so many people lined up, and I'm like, dude, I'll do it like for free, basically. But unfortunately, the chemical companies don't like.
Yeah,
give
is it because there's not like there's not a direct way to monetize? So
that's exactly right. It doesn't cure anybody's health.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop you from suffering, which is, hey, look, I understand it. If people are suffering and in pain, like,
but maybe it does.
We don't know.
The
thing is, we don't know because we don't ever look at it.
Yeah, so, you don't really know.
The Chinese and the Russians haven't done that,
Well,
because I would see.
Maybe they but they don't publish it.
Yeah. I would just seem like there was
Not gonna always make it known. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, that doesn't mean it's not science.
Yeah.
But it's never been done here. We tried to put in for 3 grants to biopsy everybody at the American Open because it's in Anaheim.
Yeah.
It's like 5 miles from my lab. We just can't get any funding for it.
Wow.
But we got some. I'm gonna pull some basically personal income into that, and we're gonna biopsy the shit out of everybody at the American Open if they let us.
Yeah.
So if you're going to the American Open and you want to be in our study, girl or guy, if you're gonna compete, we would love to biopsy because we have no information on. We have nothing on any power athletes. We have nothing on any strength athletes. The only little bit of information we have suggests that fiber type is probably more predicting of speed than strength. So all the studies we've done now, we've published multiple. We can't find any correlation between fiber type percentage and strength.
Right.
So people who are afraid of medical procedures, just tell us what the biopsy would entail.
It's actually not that big a deal. It's actually like literally yesterday we did 4 on one person in the same day. So he did a biopsy. He did 6 rounds of 1.5 minutes at his max heart rate, 2.5 minutes of recovery, 6 rounds of that. Then we did another biopsy. He rested, a third one, and then another biopsy. So we've done them in the Soleus pre-post marathon.
So you're sticking a needle in, or you're sticking in a...
We have a needle. It's giant. It looks like a pen. It's huge.
You're taking muscle tissue.
And we take muscle tissue, but it's like a blood draw. It looks awful, but you can. I did a biopsy. I've had probably 40 on myself.
Wow.
We've done one in the
Imagine how
leg.
jacked you'd be if you didn't.
So that's why I'm not tan either.
You would be insane.
That's why I'm genetically about your size usually, but so many biopsies.
It's just pulled all the strength out of you.
Sucked down.
Yeah. We can actually measure it. We usually get about 100 milligrams of tissue, which a milligram, add a digit, and you get, you go to a gram, you get to a kilogram. So I can actually be like, okay, man, you just lost 0.1% of your gain. Sorry, bro.
Damn it.
Like, whatever. But we stick a little needle in there, take a little bit of tissue. It doesn't really hurt. We did one where I had a biopsy. We did 8 sets of 3 at 85% of a clean pull. And every minute in between that, we did a maximum effort mid-thigh isometric pull. Another biopsy, and the whole thing again, a third biopsy. So you can still lift, like you can.
It's interesting. You have to have the stimulus in there beforehand. Why is that?
Well, it just depends on which marker. So something like fiber type, we just do it at rest.
Okay.
But if we're looking at some of those signaling proteins I talked about earlier, or how those genes are expressed,
You want to see what happened.
yeah. So what I want to do is I want to put you through one protocol and put you through another protocol, and take a biopsy of both of them. Actually, put you through 2 protocols and figure out which one activated those growth proteins more. That's the only way we find out the mechanisms.
It's really strange the way that some of these people come to be, and the way that they learn stuff. Like the Moto Man. Do you know about Moto Man?
No.
Moto Man was Lance Armstrong's gardener,
Okay.
who was providing him with drugs all along his route.
Oh my God.
And
That's awesome.
Oddly enough, the guy
Awesome.
was like knowledgeable about some of the stuff that he was using. And then Lance had another guy having a hard time remembering his name, but I think his last name was Ferrari. I think that was like his last name, but I can't recall. But
Is that his endocrinologist? Is that his?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. But that guy knew, like, the information that guy knew.
Yeah.
I think they just know it just by doing, just by trying, and they're trying crazy stuff. I mean, we just had a bodybuilder die a couple days ago from taking what they think is large amounts of insulin. And these guys insulin can kill you, pretty quickly. And then EPO, Lance was messing around with a lot of that stuff. It blows my mind the type of things that they were doing. So they would go to whatever altitude he was gonna do the Tour de France at, and he would train his ass off up there, and they'd draw that blood from him there, and then they would take that same blood, and when it was competition time, they would
give it back to him. Yeah.
It blows my mind with some of these extremes, that can be.
You wouldn't, like we were talking
Have you
about
seen
this
the
earlier.
Armstrong Live? Seen the documentary?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, you'd love it.
Really?
It's intense. It's wild. It's
I gotta
really
put
good.
that and Icarus are on my list.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one at all. I don't know if it's any.
Yeah,
good.
I've seen both. Yeah. Icarus was good, but the Lance Armstrong thing was just, to me, it's like I've not to that level. Like he was on another level even, but I've kind of felt similar to where it's like I want to do anything and everything I can to win, and I'm not really worried about, okay, there's consequences to it. It's like, okay, the consequences are also that I might win.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to keep fighting this fight, and it seems dumb,
Right.
but I'm
My wife always teases me
addicted
like,
to it.
how the hell do men ever make it to adulthood?
That's true.
That's a good question.
I don't know. Like, just I don't know. There's
Oh,
so
we
many risks
know a
we
lot of
take.
guys in here that are just like have these bruises and scars and crazy shit from when they were a kid
Oh yeah.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they tried wild shit or did wild,
Yeah.
real high level sports or even just messing around with their brothers or whatever. They
Shotgun
nearly
a
killed
whole
each
fifth
other.
of tequila. Like, yeah, I can do that. Let's try it.
Well, I think that's what confounds all the NFL concussion stuff, because these are the same guys that were getting concussions when they were little kids, because they did all kinds of crazy shit that they shouldn't have done, and they survived, head bonks and
Yeah, that's a really different one because that's selection bias pretty heavy,
yeah.
with that stuff. I don't know a tremendous amount. That's not my area, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I can't remember the guy's name. Dude, I would totally give you credit if I can remember your name. But he's a neurologist, I think, physician in Denver, and he spoke at the NSCA's combat clinic last year, and this is like what he does. He did Peyton Manning's neck surgery, like a bunch of these things. He's really good, and he talked about that, and he's like, man, it's not as clear cut as you think, and I don't think. Internet, correct me, I'm sure you will if I'm wrong here, but I don't think there's much of a correlation between number of concussions and CTE. I think that's a tough one to establish.
Right.
Something is clearly happening there. I think they're more akin to like a bunch of low trauma over time.
Right.
Is a bigger issue, but that's another one where like the truth is not as clear as you think it is.
And genetics probably play more of a role than
Absolutely.
we have any idea.
They're much more likely to take those collision risks and things like that than the rest of us.
And the effects might be different from person to person too.
Yeah, most definitely. It's hard to, like we were talking about before. Some of the science stuff, and in the book we talk about like even genetic testing, like that is not even remotely as dialed as you think it is.
No.
Like, it is. We are guessing at so much of that stuff. So even back then, like with Lance, that was still wild, wild west. Like they didn't know exactly what they were doing with the EPO. It's just like, well, how much did you take last time? 1. Okay, let's take 1.5 and see what happens. You didn't die. Great. Let's take 2. Oh, you passed out. All right, let's back it off to 1.5. Like, and then they start combining things. They make cocktails. Like, we are really far behind on a lot of this physiology, especially with performance and nutrition. That a lot of it, even the experts, are just guessing.
There's so many different ways to attack it. Like in their case, they're trying to cheat the system.
Yeah.
All the way to the point where a guy made like this like micro engine. You ever heard about that?
No.
Yeah, a guy made like this little tiny. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like made up. It sounds like science fiction. But a guy literally made an engine for the bike.
Oh,
that
like a
would give you-
mechanical engine, like on the bike. Oh,
Yeah,
that's sneaky.
it was like
Elegant. I like it.
you could check out the whole bike and you wouldn't even be able to detect it. It's so tiny. It just like went in the pedals, and it would give you like 3%.
Oh, that's enough.
But Christ,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh, that's enough.
So they when they were going uphill and stuff like that, it started to be really apparent. They're like, "How's this guy? He's like literally smoking everybody."
Yeah.
And this guy made millions of dollars, and he's like, "I'm not going to tell you who paid me to make it because that's my income."
Wow.
But there's all kinds of that's an example of somebody obviously going way outside the box. But
I like it. Innovative.
Yeah, right. It's fucking creative at the very least.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many different ways to attack it. In the case of something like cycling, maybe it's weight training, and maybe it's
sure.
looking into running, and maybe it's a lot of sprint work. Maybe maybe sprinting hasn't been examined enough or in that field because they're thinking, oh, we got to go a really long distance, and so that's where we're gonna put our money and time into. But
Right.
maybe a 1-rep squat or something could be effective.
The difficult part too is we deal with this a lot with the MMA fighters I work with. Is it is a moving target, so the body doesn't work like a computer software program, where if you imagine or a car would work, right? Well, a car has a very specific way that it works, and if you take one part out, like it doesn't work. And you can take one out and add one, and you get it very clear. Well, the body is alive. When you take one thing out or add one thing, everything else changes around it. And so you can't just this is why self-experimentation is very, very difficult, because now you start injecting, okay, I'm going to start sleeping more because I'm fired up, and I'm going to change my diet. And then, I'm not going to talk to this girl anymore because she stresses me the hell out. And I'm not going to do this. And all of a sudden you change 5 or 6 things. Right. So now it's actually really difficult to figure out what actually was it? Was it that little bit of insulin shot you got, or was it that little bump at test that you got at the doctor, and now all of a sudden you feel better, or was it all these things, or was it a combination? You can't actually know because it won't actually have the same response every time. Because now the second time you take it, there's a different environment, a milieu that it's involved with, and it's going to respond differently. So, like testosterone, there's a thing called, basically hormesis, where a little bit of something is good, or could be good, but a lot of it is toxic. And I think it's really important that we shift our mindset away from things being good or bad for us. Like the easy example,
Exercise even.
but yes, like we were talking about,
Do a lot of it, and it's probably not great for you.
water, right? Like, okay, being dehydrated will kill you.
Yeah.
But hyponatremia will also kill you.
Right.
That comes from having too much water.
Right.
Wash out all your electrolytes.
Exactly.
One thing that must be difficult is when somebody comes to you and, if I'm, wanting to increase performance a lot, and I come to you, I'm going to probably be sharing with you information, some of it very valuable, but some of it's probably also a lie. Like I might tell you, hey, like here's what I need to work on, but like I know I don't need to work on some of the other things because I'm super explosive and I can handle this, and this, and I can't eat carbohydrates. And you mentioning somebody being a moving target, if that is true for that particular person, it may not be true in 6 months.
That's totally, because also now they're older,
Right.
and now they got an injury, and now they got this other things going on. Like I have been fortunate. I've had a lot of success with the athletes I've helped. Pretty clean record. But it haven't worked for everybody. And I am either like a great person to work with or a terrible person to work with, because if you walk into me, like I'm not going to type you out a diet and here you go. That's never going to happen with me because I understand all these things and I'm like, okay, I don't know. Like my answer is always, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
Let me call some people. Let's get some ideas.
It's going to be a long story. And
exactly.
A
Let's start trying some things and let's data record and see what we can do. But I don't know ever the answer for all those things. You walk in, you tell me A, B, and C. You don't respond to carbs. Okay, fine. All right. I'm going to trust you here. But I think where I've done well is I definitely have some athletes that I've worked with. Most of them I've never named by name, specifically for this reason. So none of you, like you can't go back, calculate, and figure out who it is. But I have worked with several athletes, professional athletes, that have admitted to me a lot of their PED use.
Right.
But I don't ask them that stuff. I don't. But they've come to me eventually because we built up enough trust where they're like, okay, this is actually what's going on, because they know I can't actually help you if I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you need to know all the info.
Yeah, and so because of that, I've never wanted to, like, I've never even mentioned to people that I've worked with these folks. But that's where it's like, I tell them just straight out the gates, like, I don't know a lot of these answers. I don't know. You tell me whatever you want to tell me, and I'll give you as best as I can from there. And I'm really in it for you. And you build up enough trust, so eventually start, like, things will come out. I actually, okay, well, maybe I'm not handling carbs right now because I just took a bunch of insulin. Oh, okay.
Right.
Now let's change our approach a little bit.
I came off a cycle of doing this, and maybe this is why.
This is why I'm so tired.
You're going to see the test be real low or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. So I just, and plus it's so complicated. Like if you talk to somebody who's a gut expert and they're super into microbiota, like you realize almost all that stuff's nonsense right now. Like we're totally guessing. We're way more wrong than we ever are right. There's something there, clearly.
Probiotics, prebiotics, like
nobody knows what they're doing.
Sound healthy, but we don't really know.
We don't have any clue.
I don't think we really know.
We know that fecal transplant works for a lot of people. But
yeah, they've been showing some of that, yeah.
Kind of.
But it's still new. It's still new.
Yeah, like it's something I'm happy other people are looking into.
Poop transplants.
Yes.
You betcha, man. That's all in, bro. That is all in.
That's being dedicated.
I will definitely work with you if you've ever had a poop transplant. Like, you are committed. I'm down. So it's just an inexact science, and the more that we can admit that and just say, this is what's been helpful, this is what I'm doing, but...
Shout out to all of our sponsors, Precision Nutrition. Go to get.pn/PowerCast for your free course on largely on the use of carbs in your diet. 8-Man Apparel at 8manstrong.com, Reebok.com, home of the Legacy lifting shoe, the official shoe of the PowerCast, CompexUSA.com. Get 28 additional % off with the code PowerCast. Bodybuilding.com for all of your supplement needs. howmuchabench.net, Mark Bell's Slingshot. Use the code PowerCast, get 15% off Slingshots, and Power, the only strength magazine available in both digital and print, at thepowermagazine.com. I